Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the UK Boarding School iFestival. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Wallace Wong, and I am the Registrar of Wycombe Abbey School, Hong Kong. I will also serve as the moderator for today's webinar. Now, today's agenda will include presentations from some of the best boys boarding schools in the UK. Each presentation will last approximately 30 minutes. At the end of each presentation, we will also include a Q&A session, which will last approximately 10 minutes. Now, for this Q&A session, you're welcome to type in your questions in the Q&A text box. You can press the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, which will prompt up a box that will allow you to type your questions. I, the moderator, will then ask your questions aloud for our speakers to answer. We'll do our best to address all questions asked during today's Q&A for each presentation. At the end of each presentation, contact details of the presenting school or organization will be shown on your screen. We'll also follow up with a post-webinar survey to all of our viewers. Now, without further ado, I would like to hand it over to the Headmaster of Wycombe Abbey School, Hong Kong, Mr. Howard Tuckett. Thank you, Howard.
Everybody, thank you, Wallace. You can hear me all right?
Yes.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Well, welcome everybody, and a very warm welcome to this third week of the Wycombe Abbey Schools Hong Kong UK Boarding Schools iFestival. This is the final webinar in our September series. In previous Saturdays, we have welcomed on the Saturday, the 5th of September, speakers from some of the finest co-educational boarding schools in the United Kingdom. We welcome speakers from Marlborough, from Sevenoaks School, from Rugby, and from Caterham School. Last week, on Saturday the 12th, we welcomed speakers from girls' schools Down House, Wycombe Abbey, Cheltenham Ladies College, St Mary's Cairn, and Badminton. And today we welcome the boys' schools, and we have a whole afternoon of speakers from some of the top boys' boarding schools in the United Kingdom. We've also been very fortunate to be able to welcome independent speakers throughout the 3 weeks of the festival. Emma Van Bergen of BE Education, Jennifer Ma of Arch Education, and William Rees, who is an independent specialist. We're very fortunate that today we will be hearing from two of these independent speakers, Jennifer Ma and William Rees. My sincere thanks to Ruth Benny and Top Schools in Hong Kong for hosting the entire 3-week festival on their Zoom platform. Thank you, Ruth, and to your team for your support throughout the event. I'd like to introduce you to today's hosting team here at Wycombe Abbey School in Hong Kong. Wallace Wong, our registrar, you have just heard from. We also welcome Donna Marie Mitchell, who is one of our Year 2 teachers, and Helen Benalia Wood, who is one of our Year 1 teachers. And you'll be hearing from the team through the afternoon as we thank and introduce our various speakers. I do hope you enjoyed today's webinar, focusing on the boys' schools, and I would encourage you, as Wallace has described, to use the questioning function. We've discovered over the weeks that actually the presentations, of course, are outstanding, but so much more focused discussion and much more focused information, specific information, comes to light from the questions that you raise. And do please use the chat box function to type your questions in. Without repeating everything Wallace has said, where we can, we will type answers back to you from people who are on the team here today. Alternatively, we will put the questions to the speakers after their various presentations. I'm now going to switch over to a message of welcome from Patrick Sherrington, who is the chair of the Wycombe Abbey International.
Good afternoon. My name is Patrick Sherrington, and until March of this year, I was chairman of the council of Wycombe Abbey School in the UK. I was proud of my association with that school, which is a preeminent boarding school in Britain. And I'm proud of my continuing association with Wycombe now as chair of Wycombe Abbey International Limited, which is responsible for its international operations. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this Wycombe Abbey Festival of Boarding Schools, the first event of its kind. We're delighted that so many prestigious British boarding schools have been able to join us over 3 consecutive Saturdays for this event. Each of the presenters are key members of staff at their respective schools, and each speaker will be presenting on an important aspect of modern British education. This event is aimed at Hong Kong parents, and I know from having lived in Hong Kong myself for nearly 15 years how important education is to Hong Kong parents. Everything you see and hear is designed to inform you of the breadth and excellence of British boarding provision. And each speaker's presentation will be followed by a question and answer session, and I would encourage you to ask as many questions as you like. Here in Hong Kong, Wycombe Abbey School Hong Kong is a private British prep school, and as such, the headmaster, Howard Tuckett, and his team are experts at preparing young children for their secondary schools. So please feel free to contact Howard and the team at Wycombe Abbey School Hong Kong for information about boarding schools in Britain at any time. And finally, may I thank again all of those schools for their participation in this event and all of you for your attendance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Patrick. I would like to introduce our first speaker, Graeme May of Abingdon School. Having read English at Oxford, Graeme began his teaching career at Pocklington School, and after short stints at Blundell's and Lord's Wandsworth College, moved to St. Paul's School in London, where he was at various times head of drama, deputy head of English, and a teacher of Latin alongside his drama. Whilst he was at St. Paul's, he undertook a 2-year exchange with Sydney Grammar School, Australia. On return to London, Graeme was quickly off to a head of English post at Cheltenham College, where he also started up curricular drama, was editor of a number of school publications, and visiting tutor to a boarding house before moving on to Abingdon after 5 years. He inspects regularly for ISI and is a governor at 2 secondary schools. At Abingdon, Graeme has been deputy head academic since 2007. His core role is the strategic overview of the curriculum and of teaching and learning, and the leadership of the heads of department. He is central to the recruitment of new teachers and prospective pupils, and therefore heavily involved in advertising, marketing, and interviewing. Though his main subject is English, he has also taught drama, ancient history, computing, and PSHCE. He continues to direct drama productions when he can. Welcome, Graeme.
Thank you. Thank you for that welcome. I do recognise most of that biography. Good afternoon to you. Good morning from the UK. Quite early morning here in what looks like being a nice late summer Saturday for us. I'm going to start by sharing my screen and hope this shows us the right thing, because my main topic that I'm going to talk about first of all, and then move on to a little bit about Abingdon, is on the curricular side, to really talk about why a school like Abingdon has stuck with A-levels and why we think the A-level is really the gold standard. And that really means, therefore, talking a bit about comparisons between A-level and the IB as being the kind of most obvious alternative to A-levels. There was for a while another alternative called Pre-U, run by Cambridge, but in fact that's they've now decided they're going to bring that to a close. So the main rival for A-level would remain IB. So I'm going to start off with some comparisons. let me start by saying I'm going to talk very much from Abingdon's point of view and why we have chosen to stick with A-levels. We did certainly think, and we continue to think, about the IB as an alternative, and it is a qualification for which I have a huge respect. I think there is an awful lot to like about the IB. It's just that we think there's more to like about the A-level system. So let's take a look at some things. You'll probably be aware of some very well-known IB providers in the UK. There's just a few of them there. Some of them have already spoken at this event on different Saturdays. But what I think is really interesting to note is there's something around 2,600 independent schools in the UK. I wonder if you know how many of them are offering the IB diploma. Well, I looked it up and the answer is 73. So 73 independent schools in the UK offering the IB diploma. So it's not something, although it's been around for a very long time, it's not something which has really taken hold in the UK. It's not proliferated, it's not something that everybody's looking at and thinking, well, that's the answer, that's got to be the way to do things. In fact, it's really not grown very much in the UK. Now, there can be all kinds of perspectives, and I'm certain somebody who was talking to you from an IB school would absolutely tell you why, you know, that there are really good reasons why it hasn't taken hold, but the facts are the facts, it hasn't. What is interesting, because if you go to any of the websites of those schools, you will find that the heads of those schools absolutely evangelizing for the IB. They will tell you things like, I've just taken these from their websites, that make it sound as though IB is the only possible way and absolutely the answer to everything. It isn't a surprise. This is the kind of thing that heads do, of course, one of the reasons, possibly being a bit cynical, is it's a huge investment for a school to go into the IB. It's a huge money investment. And of course, you know, a head has to argue very strongly for the benefits of what they've invested in. But I still ask that key question. If all that you're seeing on the screen there is true, particularly things like this one, which I'm going to come back to, being told that the IB is every bit as specialist as the A-level programme, for example, that IB is about being holistic and it's really the best preparation for university study, I stick with my question. If that's true, why has it not taken hold? Again, back to the numbers. So, just to talk a little bit about the IB, again, I'm not speaking as somebody who teaches the IB. I've had a look at it, and a pretty good look at it in my time, and I'm not somebody who will never say never, but just to remind people, and maybe some people aren't completely aware of it, this is how the IB works, as you're seeing on the screen there, that you choose within these 6 groups. So language, usually your main language, your native language. Of course, being an IB, they want you to acquire another language. This is what some people might refer to as humanities, individual and societies. There's science down here, there's maths here, and then there's group 6, which is the arts. And you can not do something from group 6 and you can choose another one from these ones here. Usually, you take 3 of those to the standard level, just to kind of halfway through, and then you might take 3 or 4 of those through to the higher level. At the centre of it, they will always say there are 3 other things that you need to be talking about. You'll be doing an extended essay of some kind. You do a module on theory of knowledge, how people acquire knowledge, and they think it's pretty important, as do we actually, that you are involved in your community and you're thinking about the service that you're giving. So it all sounds great, but it does come, as I put on the title here, it does come with certain strictures. It comes with some limitations to it because you're pushed down particular routes. And you've got to like that. You've got to like that idea. So here are some of the strictures as I see it. You've got to carry on doing your language. So if you're English, and English is your main language, it makes you carry on doing English all the way to age 18 and English literature. That might suit you. Of course it might suit you, but not everybody. At a school like mine, English literature attracts a good number, sort of 30 or so boys might do English, but a lot of them they're happy reading themselves, but they don't want to be studying English literature. They want to use their time for other things. I think learning a foreign language is great, but it's not for everybody, and they don't necessarily want to do it in an academic environment. You have to do one science. That wouldn't necessarily have suited me at A level. You will have to carry on with maths. Again, I'm not sure that would have suited me. According to the strictures, you can't be a triple scientist if you want. You can't be a triple linguist. I think there are possibly some routes around that if you do a very bespoke thing with IB, but it's certainly not straightforward or easy. Let's compare that, and I must here speak from an Abingdon point of view, compare that with how A-level might work. So here are the A-level subjects that Abingdon offers. So you can see quite a list there. And I suppose my key point here is our boys get a free choice. They get to choose within that group that you see there, the ones they want to do. We don't insist on any particular thing being done. We don't insist that everybody counts with maths. Lots and lots of our boys do, probably about 2/3 of them from GCSE, but we don't insist that they do that. We don't insist that they carry on with a language. And of course, within this, not for all subjects, but for a good number of subjects, you've got lots of opportunity to choose a particular syllabus. So we have different exam boards. So you might be doing physics, you might be the head of physics, and you can choose, you can look at OCR's physics specification, you can look at Edexcel's, you can look at AQA's, those are names of different exam boards, and you can choose the one that suits you. And they'll have slightly different content, they'll have slightly different ways in which they want the course to be organized, slightly different ways in which they're going to assess things, and you can choose the route as a head of department that suits you best and the people that you're teaching best. So just to give a few examples, sorry, that's just gone back one, to give a few examples of things which I'm not certain are possible in the IB. At Abingdon, a boy can do that combination, but he can be in a tutor group, in a boarding house, next to a boy who's doing that combination, and somebody who's doing that combination, and somebody who's doing that combination, and so on and so on and so on. Because you can choose which route works best for you according to what you are really interested in. And behind this are the principles which really I'm putting up on the screen, which is really, for me, the core of why we have stuck with A-level, because it's about freedom. It's about what you being able to choose where really you want to do a lot of study. At GCSE, at Abingdon, we do choose a lot of their subjects for them. So boys will do a core of, out of 10 GCSEs, they'll do a core, usually of 7, that we have chosen for them. By the time they're getting to A-level and they're thinking about university, they're thinking about what they might want to do there, we think it's the right thing to present them with more choice and allow them to begin to specialize. It's kind of like a triangle, that it's works. You work with a broad base at the beginning and you narrow down to the things you're really interested in. And we certainly find that our students are very keen on the idea of being able to choose what they want to do and not be told what they're going to do by the time they're in sixth form. You can have different points of view on this, but for me, I'm not terribly fussed about what boys are studying. It's the study, it's the desire to study, it's the motivation to study that is more important to me, that they want to study things. And time again, it is shown to us that when boys, students are studying what they want to study, that's when you get the real payback, what they're really inspired by. So for example, even though we have all this choice, we do occasionally come across a boy and we get the sense that, you know, perhaps his parents are choosing his A-levels or pushing him down a certain route. And we do a lot to try and stop that because much more often than not, it doesn't lead to a good place. If a boy's not doing something at A-level that he's really motivated by, it tends not to go very well. We fundamentally believe in that idea of choice and being able to drop things that you no longer enjoy, you just don't want to take on as an academic thing. As I said, you know, our boys are very literate boys. not a huge number necessarily do English literature A-level, but they do read. They're perfectly able to do that and happy to do that, but they want to do it in their own way. So that principle of freedom for us is crucial. Again, I'm sure somebody from an IB school will object to what I'm about to say, but this is my take on things. First of all, I think it's pretty incontrovertible that IB takes more time to do. It takes more curricular time to do. It's simply in terms of the hours that they expect of you in the classroom, it's a bigger number. So here's my take on it. You may like that. I think it's good for the reasons that I've put up on the screen there. Some people are afraid of what we call study periods. They think, well, if we give boys free time, what are they going to do with it? Boys at Abingdon use it to study. That may not be true of all schools. You may not feel that they have the maturity or the motivation to use their study periods. At Abingdon, for us, it's a really important thing because it's about moving towards university. So in the lower six, in year 12, they have a few. They have a few study periods, and then usually by partway through the lower six and certainly by the upper six, they usually have a good number of them for maybe sort of 8 or 10 across a cycle for us, which is a 2-week cycle, when they can actually get on and do their own study. We think that's the right kind of preparation for them for what they're moving on to, and pretty much all of our boys will move on to university. So my other question is always, do you have a problem occupying their time? Do you not know what you do with that time if you were given it? I've got Abingdon's answer coming in a moment. Perhaps you really like the fact that the IB ethos, which is very attractive in lots of ways, but it's it gives you something to hold on to. It gives you a structure, and perhaps you do just believe that things should be a bit more controlled and perhaps a bit less in terms of student choice. That's not the way Abingdon goes, but that's our view. To give you a sense of the number of hours, and this is just taken from the IB website, that's the kind of sort of hours we're talking, which is, I would say, significantly less than you might expect at A-level. So on the depth versus breadth question, you saw one of those websites earlier on saying, well, there's just as much depth in the IB. The received wisdom has always been, well, if you're going to do more subjects, which the IB makes you do, you're probably going to be doing them in less depth than you're doing A-level. But some people would argue against it. You're going to get very different views. I'm giving you a view there. The University Admissions Officers report was kind of in 2017. Happy to say what you said there, what you can see there. The IB, good, encouraging a global outlook. But really there isn't much doubt. A-levels are the ones that give you the real in-depth expertise. So, listen to 10 people, get 10 different opinions, I'm sure, but I'm pretty convinced that A-level is about depth. So here's the big question for a school like Abingdon. Okay, if you've gone with the depth, what about what perhaps the IB gives students that A-levels aren't necessarily going to give them? Can you give them that depth, the rigor that comes with that, as well as that breadth of holistic education, as well as that global perspective? And this is where I'm going to get even more specific really about Abingdon, because yes is the answer, but I think you've got to have a really, really strong co-curricular program. A really strong ethos of exploration, a really strong ethos of development and being outward looking. So for a school like Abingdon, remember that's back to the A-level list, and boys will be doing at the beginning of the lower six, they'll be doing 4 of those. Very often that will reduce to 3 by the end of it. UK universities are still only looking for 3 rather than 4 A-levels. Our boys will tend to, by the upper six, focus in on those to make sure they maximise their grades on that. But we also expect, or certainly encourage, the EPQ. I'm going to talk a bit about that. That's the extended project qualification, or if they're not going to take that on, which is a full qualification, a good number of our boys also do our own internal summer project, as we call it. And then what no boy at Abingdon can get out of being involved in the other half. So I'm going to talk a little bit about those. So you remember the IB has its own extended project, and I think extended projects are fantastic. I usually supervise 2 or 3 of them myself during the year. They're brilliant things to supervise for some key reasons. For us, essentially, the EPQ gets done from the spring of the lower six through to the autumn of the upper six. And the brilliant thing about it is students get to choose whatever they want to talk about. They set their own question under the guidance of a supervisor like me, often related to A-level work, but it can't overlap. It can't just be doing more of the same. It's often related to things they're thinking about doing at university. And it encourages genuine research skills. So I don't teach them. I don't teach the boys that I'm supervising. In fact, at Abingdon, we very deliberately assign supervisors to boys in areas that the supervisor isn't an expert. Because if you are an expert in that area, you're tempted probably to become a teacher again and start teaching them. Actually, my job is to organise the process, make sure their research base is sound, to guide them along the way, to be a kind of informed but not expert reader of what they write, and get them to think about the process. Because one of the key things for us is this idea of the accent on learning to learn. Because part of the self-assessment of that is that you've got to be thinking all the time about the process you've gone through, and about 20% of the marks are allocated really to your reflection on what you've learnt about learning during it. For me, and I've looked at the theory of knowledge element of IB, for me, that's really the best way to learn about learning, is by doing things. The theory of knowledge has got some wonderful concepts in it, but I've found it when I've looked at it, it's rather separate. You're kind of learning about learning without actually applying that in a direct way very often. And for me, I think learning is about doing. And I've always found when I've looked at theory of knowledge unit, it just seems to me to be a bit divorced from actually applying it. Other things about the EPQ which I think are brilliant is they have to do a presentation. So they're working on their presentation skills, their performance, their ability to talk to an audience and take questions on their feet. They don't know what the question is going to be. They have to take questions on that. And they produce an essay, or they can produce what's called an artifact. They can actually construct something. So a couple of years ago, I had a boy whose project was creating an app for an iPhone. And you had to have some writing backup for it, but the kind of product was the app itself. So I would also say that learning to learn is a strong element of what you're doing in A-level as well. So very good preparation for A-level, very, very good preparation for boys, which is why we kind of time it as we do. For our students who are thinking about Oxbridge application, they usually have an EPQ under their belt, and that is a brilliant thing to go to an Oxbridge interview and be able to talk about, because Oxbridge is always going to be looking at, okay, that's what you've done for A-level. What else have you done? What more have you done beyond your A-level course to show that you're really, really interested in your subject? The EPQ is a great answer to that. The other thing that's important, and when we talked about that idea of timing, and maybe the IB takes up lots and lots of time, and if you're doing A-level, perhaps you've got a bit less time than that in the classroom. What are you going to do with that time? Well, our answer is what we call the other half, and you've got to make time for that. I am very used to interviewing. I've been interviewing boys from Hong Kong now for sort of 6 or 7 years, and it is very, very common for me to hear, when I talk about motivation, why do you want to come to the UK, a very common strand is to hear boys talking to me saying, in Hong Kong, pretty much every hour I've got is occupied with academic work. It breaks my heart when I see on somebody's profile that they say, well, I used to do piano, but I've not been able to do it recently because there's just so much work I have to do. And I come home from school and then I've got to go to this tutor or that tutor. That is not Abingdon's philosophy. We don't think that you get the best academically out of boys by just shoving lots and lots and lots of work at them. For us, this is just a taste of a few pictures. It's our extracurricular program and what that offers. And for a school like Abingdon, it's a huge number of activities, and that's how we're occupying the boys' time that IB perhaps might have them sat in a classroom for a bit longer. This is from our website, although actually I wrote it. We do have this term, the other half. We think it's unique to us. You can't see any other school using it. And it really does encapsulate the philosophy of Abingdon, that we say what you're doing in the classroom, that's half of you. There is a whole other half that we want to encourage, we want to prosper, we want to nurture, and that's what's going on in the other half and on our pastoral side, that you've got to be developing everything else about you. For Abingdon, we keep counting and recounting. It seems to go up every time we do it. We've got something like over 150 different activities that a boy might do. It's pretty impossible, I would say, for a boy to come into school and do everything. One boy who was head of school one year did tell me he reckoned he ticked everything off and done absolutely everything. He tried everything. I'm not quite sure that was feasible, but he reckoned he had. So we're about choice. We're about and the key thing for us there is that we don't insist on any particular thing. We don't say to a boy coming into year 9, for example, right, your sport is rugby. If you don't like rugby, that's fine. There are other things that you might do. Not all 150 are available to every boy every second of the day. That would be impossible for us to organise. So it's organised obviously by terms and a little bit by year groups, what's available. But there's no particular compulsion. The compulsion is that you must do something. So a boy can't come to Abingdon and say, I'm just going to work in the classroom. That's all I want to do. There's nothing else. And it's a key part of the interviews that I conduct. So freedom of choice, and they'll work with a tutor who will help them try to balance those things, balancing not just the other half versus the academic and make sure that they're getting that balance right, but also within the other half. So a tutor might look at a boy who's very sporty, who just wants to do a main sport and then a couple of extra sports alongside in other slots, and we'll say, well, okay, but why don't you balance that a little bit with something a bit more cultural? Why don't you get involved in doing a magazine? Why don't you get involved in the debating society? How about, you use your music and be involved in one of the ensembles or orchestra? And a tutor will try and help a boy keep that balance of the other half. So as an example, this is just an example. Spring term's quite a good example of the middle term. In any week, Abingdon will be putting out this kind of roster. So huge number of hockey teams, football teams, but rowing will be there. Rugby will be carrying on in rugby sevens, cross country, fencing, badminton, squash, basketball. I don't think that's exhausting. If that's what's going on in a week, you'll see those things particularly happening on a Saturday. But in the same week, there'll be orchestra, there'll be all the ensembles, there'll be other performances, and in the same week, there'll be people working on publications, there'll be debating, there'll be MUN, Model United Nations, there'll be the chess club, and so on and so on and so on. And here's a key thing about it, coming at the bottom of the screen. You can be one boy and you can be doing all three of those kind of categories. It's not that at Abingdon you're just sporty, or you're just musical, or all you do is the debating. You can be all three of those things, and our timetable is worked out so that you can participate in all three of those things. You might have one that's more important to you. You might be right up here in the first 11 for football, and not in the first orchestra, but in the second orchestra. And you might go along to debating to offer points from the floor rather than being a main speaker. That's fine, that you've got one particular one that you want to emphasize, but you're participating in a huge number of things. That is what we think is important. That's what we think the IB would possibly constrict at a school like Abingdon, that freedom to do those other things. And my goodness, isn't the other half really important for the development of character, of teamwork, of those skills that we hear time and time again that employers are looking for in terms of ability to work with other people, solving problems, resilience and perseverance. Yes, you can see those things on the academic side, but you see them in spade loads when you're looking at them in a school's extracurricular. The last thing that I'll talk about then is this idea of global perspective. Just a couple of pictures to bring in there. Can you have global perspective in a school if you don't do IB? Well, yes, of course you can. How do we do it at Abingdon? For us, it is immensely helped by the fact we're a boarding school, and our day boys, absolutely embrace those boarders that come into us, embrace their different cultures. That mix of cultures is fantastic. So the whole school, for example, celebrates Chinese New Year. And that is a huge input, but also the huge number of trips overseas that we have. You can see lots of sports trips going on, most recently going out to South Africa, things associated with particular activities. So I'm thinking of the music tour last year that went to Japan and indeed came to Hong Kong as well. Subject-based ones, so subjects will often go out, geography, for example, going out to places like Iceland. I accompanied the physics trip. If you heard my introduction, you know I'm no physicist, but I accompanied, because I was interested, the physics trip that went to CERN in Switzerland to look at things like the Large Hadron Collider last Christmas. That's a trip that goes every year, as well as ones that are just open to anybody, don't have to be doing a particular activity or subject to do it. For example, the annual skiing trip. So we think that is part of giving that global perspective. And for us, it comes, again, crucial idea, it comes from experience. It comes from really engaging and doing things, not from just talking about doing it. It comes from the experience of doing it. So academically, unashamedly, I'll put some results up there for us. Can you excel in A-level? These results are pretty typical. We publish all our results going back years and years and years and years. You can see them for yourselves. I've got links at the end. So these are pretty typical. For us, GCSEs are a real excellent point of kind of holding students to account, a real moment of test for them at age of 16. I've mostly focused on the idea of the IB diploma at sixth form level. The middle years program, I know the IB offers, I don't see that its rigor is quite there in terms of what it's doing with 16-year-olds, if I'm honest. I think GCSEs really do place a lot of rigor and hold students to account for their learning and give them a real test. A-levels, again, rigorous point of accountability, very well respected by universities. And just in terms of, does Abingdon produce the goods as well as doing all the other half and the trips abroad? I hope those figures do speak for themselves in terms of what a school like Abingdon can produce from its students. So 3 key things just to finish off with. A school like Abingdon, very strong academics, the rigor of that GCSE and A-level, the depth that comes from doing A-level subjects, holistic education. Key for us is that other half, the co-curricular provision, pastoral support, very much a philosophy of doing, not just talking about doing, but actually actively doing things. And then that strong worldview that comes from that fantastic blend we have of boarding and day pupils, and what I've referred to there as the expedition philosophy, the idea of getting out and actually going out into the world and doing things. So I'm going to see what questions have come my way. That's just an aerial shot of Abingdon School, and I will just leave it on for anybody who wants to note anything down. Some of those key areas that I've talked about there, I mean, if you just go to our website, abingdon.org.uk, obviously you can go anywhere, but other half is there, academic performance, and then from the admissions department, 2 key things. So I think I'll be told if I've got run over time horribly, Wallace, but I think I'm pretty much on time to take any questions.
Thank you, Graeme. That was great. Yes, so let's begin the Q&A session. We do have time for a few questions, so I'll begin right away. So the first question we have is, first of all, thank you for the presentation and a and all the insights on the differences between A levels and IB. Now, are you concerned about the grade inflation in A levels in recent years? And has that changed the dynamics of university entrance?
Yeah, this year aside, which is a very unusual year because we were all doing centre assessed grades, I don't think the grade inflation has been extreme. Actually, I think they've tried to keep a good control over things. But of course, what they did not all that long ago was bring in the A star. So that was a way really of distinguishing at that very, very top level, and I suspect partly in reaction to people's fears about grade inflation. We could spend a long time talking about grade inflation. One of the things I think schools are always, it's kind of being beaten with a stick. We're all supposed to be improving. We're all supposed to be getting better in what we're doing. So you ought to see that in the results. If you didn't see an improvement in results, people will be saying to us, well, what are you doing to improve? But when you do improve, people then say, oh, that's only grade inflation. So you end up between a rock and a hard place in terms of, if you're trying to improve and get results better, but then people are saying, well, they're only getting better because they're giving the grades more easily. It doesn't seem very fair to me. It feels to me, in terms of teaching A level, it's a good, strong standard. But the A star is there for some distinction, and some universities are definitely using it. Cambridge in particular, I would say.
Sure, of course. Thank you, Graeme. And just furthermore into your presentation, now a few of our attendees are asking, if my child is coming from an IB school and they're trying to apply to Abbey, is that a difficult transition or journey? And just in general, for those who are interested in boarding schools but are coming from an IB school.
Coming from doing probably the middle years program, you mean?
Correct. Yes.
I suppose. Yeah. No. I mean, we need to know that a certain level of content has been covered. There's an expectation. GCSEs lead very neatly onto A levels, and we partly choose our GCSEs matching against the likelihood of our students going on to A level. So that's. But when I talked about choice of syllabus, that's partly sometimes why we do it. Sometimes why we've chosen the international GCSE over the homegrown one, because about how its preparation is. So we would need to. They would sit the same tests. We set a paper in each of the subjects that they might do, as well as some general like verbal reasoning and an English essay if their native language isn't English, to test, and then we do an interview. So it very much depends on sort of case by case. It might be awkward if they want to do physics A level and they haven't covered an awful lot of what would be in an IGCSE specification. It's not necessarily the end of the line, because work can be done over the summer in between, but we would have to have a close look at it.
Sure, thank you. And I believe we may have time for about one more question, so I'll make this one a little bit longer. Now, we do have a few attendees asking, how does the application process typically look for someone that's applying from Hong Kong? And let's say they're interested in applying this year, how would that process look? And then furthermore, on top of that question is, we do see the standard years of entry on the website, but do you also take students that are older or in other years?
Well, standard years of entry, so year 9, year 10 and year 12, boys can't come into year 11, you can't come in halfway through a GCSE course, and at year 7 and 8, we don't board at year 7 and 8. So if it's a boarding place, we don't begin until year 9. So, and also, no, you wouldn't take someone into year 13 halfway through an A-level course. So that's why. Broadly, although there's a lot more information, and you can see the links there on the slide I've left up. Broadly, people come to us often using an agent in Hong Kong. I'm not going to name any particular ones. You know who they are. But they'll often use an agent, but sometimes people will just contact us directly. And depending on the sequence of things, sometimes, usually, of course, we'd be over there in Hong Kong at the moment. We might do some interviews beforehand, and then boys would come on to do our exams. Sometimes they do our exams first, and then we do an interview with them. Depends on what level, but if below A level, they'll do an exam in English. looking at comprehension and at composition, so English writing. They'll do an exam in maths. They'll do a reasoning exam, and they'll do a grammar test usually, and then, for most boys, not all, for most boys that would lead on to an interview, quite often with me, though not always. I mean, quite frankly, there are so many applicants, I don't think I can do them all myself usually, but I do a lot of them. At A level, as described, we give them a paper in what subjects they want to do, in the English essay, and the grammar, and the verbal reasoning, and the interview as well. We very much invite people to come across to the UK if they're able to, but we're also very happy with kind of approved centres with sending papers across. So, you know, some of our agencies will do that for us. The British Commission will do that for us. So we're happy with certain places that we will send the exams across. Does that give a broad enough view without too much detail? There's a lot more detail on our website.
Sure, no, that does. And just, yes, no, that's great. And just more specifically, for those that are wanting to apply from Hong Kong this year, how does that
next year?
Yes, for next year. Should they start now if they're looking
Absolutely.
for 2021 entry?
Yeah, so I mean, 2021 for us, I have to say, is pretty much already full. Not totally. Sixth form we'd be interested in. Third year, year 9 entry 2021. Probably for Abingdon, the bad news is the best you can hope for at the moment is a waiting list place. Year 10 possibly, but more likely waiting list. But we do take boys from the waiting list during the year. It does happen. It's not that people sit on the waiting list and then there's never any change. Really, for Abingdon, it's moved into a game where you need to be thinking 2 years ahead. So, you know, it's 2022, certainly for year 9 and year 10, that people should be thinking about Abingdon. But sixth forms, you know, often a little bit different. But even then, we'd encourage people to be looking a bit ahead. But I'm conscious that the sixth form, it tends to be people aren't certain about that until just before, and we have a few more places there. Okay.
Sure. Thank you, Graeme. Okay, and before I let you go, I believe that's all the time we have for today. Do you have any last words for our guests?
No, thank you. I'm so sorry that we can't be with you in Hong Kong. Jane and I, Jane, my colleague, who I know is watching what's going on at the moment, we come across to Hong Kong every year and just love our time there, and, you know, interviewing people, learning a bit more about. I think it's so important that we. I mean, you know, some people say, you know, when all this is over, is anybody going to fly anywhere anymore? We think it's really important that we come, that we're not just sat in England and, you know, and saying, well, come to us, but we don't know anything about you. I'm so sorry I can't be there. That's my message. I really enjoy my time in Hong Kong, learning more about it, trying to visit a different place every time that I go. I haven't yet been allowed by the head of the Director of Missions to go to Ocean Park, but that is my big aim when I'm allowed back into Hong Kong. So that's it. I'd much rather be doing this in person than over Zoom, but you know, this is where we're in at the moment. So thank you very much, Wallace, and thank you to Wycombe for hosting.
Well, thank you so much, Graeme, for your very insightful and detailed presentation and for the questions which you've just answered. Thanks very much. Our next speaker will be Dr. Nick Black from Dulwich College. Dr. Nick Black is a Director of Admissions at Dulwich College, having formerly been head of the middle school, years 9 to 11, and head of history. His British Naval Staff in the First World War was awarded the Anderson Medal in 2010. Nick co-edited Dulwich 400 in 2019, described by one correspondent as a rare example of wit in scholarship. Welcome, Dr. Nick Black.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. So I'm going to share my screen. Good morning. So so I teach at Dulwich College, and you can see an aerial shot of the college in this picture. It's got about 70 acres of grounds, which might surprise people given it's in London. And it's about 12 minutes on the train from London Victoria, so easy access to airports and central London for all people. It's a boys' school. We are predominantly a day school, but we have about 150 boarders, and pastorally, we are a form-based school, which means the sort of day-to-day experience of boarders is that they are members of forms, which obviously means that they mix every day, not just through lessons, but in their pastoral time with the day boys, who obviously are a cross-section of the population of London. The campus itself is extensive. We've been on this site, this particular one, for 150 years, in Dulwich itself for 400 years. And at the centre of it are these historic listed buildings, which is where things like the Great Hall, the library, and classrooms are. And next door to it is a newly built science building with an auditorium, 20 laboratories, and our IT rooms. I've been asked to talk about two things. One is teaching resilience, and the other is a little bit about thinking, you know, the questions I guess you should ask about university and life after school. And the first thing is teaching resilience. The picture is of a man who was a boy at Dulwich College, as you can see, in the 1880s. You may have heard of him, Ernest Shackleton. He was a polar explorer. And I guess the thing about resilience is things don't always go right, you know, and I think it's quite hard sometimes how do you teach that? How do you teach being able to think about and cope with having to change your mind, having to adapt, having to often be quite spontaneous in terms of the plans that you think you have and the way that you need to respond, above all, to kind of failure. The picture here shows Shackleton's boat being crushed in the ice at the South Pole during the First World War. His scheme went wrong, you know, and how do you then adapt that and then bring all of his fellow explorers on this particular expedition home and escape across the ice, across the South Atlantic? Extraordinary journey. And I guess it's that sense of being adaptable to your circumstances, which is something which schools really want you as pupils to try and learn and think about as you go through the school. His lifeboat is at the centre of our science block. You can see it there on the ground floor. The waves around it from the South Atlantic apparently as high as the building itself. And therefore I've got this kind of thought at the bottom, which is this sense of both the safety belt. You know, schools want to have layers of support in place for all of those questions which arise, which are complicated, which cause doubt. You know, what am I supposed to do? How do I respond to this? But also, I think, as we all do in our own lives, we often basically learn from things that go wrong. I sometimes, as a teacher, you sometimes worry about these people with charmed lives where nothing ever goes wrong, and just wonder to what extent they do maybe develop layers of empathy if they haven't experienced what most of us do when things go awry somewhat. And I think there's a balance there between having, as it were, the support, but also having the sense in which you can fail. You know, things can go wrong, and how do you respond to that? How do you adapt to that? And I think there are various things that as schools we try and do to inculcate, I guess, some of those skills into the pupils during their time with us. So, and there's a picture of Shackleton in that same boat. He went 800 miles across the South Atlantic and then had to walk across South Georgia as well to get help. Extraordinary story. But everyone survived, and I guess that's the message, really. Clearly, working with your teachers is a central thing. And having that sense of responding to assessment. I think it's all very well for teachers to mark work, but it's that dialogue that you have with them and talk about them, and that openness to rethinking things. You know, when I do interviews for university candidates, one of the things that seems to me is that sense of if I was a university teacher, you know, late Friday afternoon on a kind of February, you know, does my heart sink hearing those footsteps coming up the stairs, or am I excited by it? And it's that sense of which you can adapt to, well, have you thought about this? Or what about this evidence? Does that change what you're thinking about? And I think that ability to interact and talk to teachers, I think, is an essential thing in developing that ability to respond and to rethink, recalibrate your own ideas. And it's not just about A-levels and public exams. I think there is a real sense in which you perhaps can put yourselves in places which are less structured and formed, and therefore where there is more space for you to develop your own ideas, to bounce them off teachers and other people's work. And at Dulwich, there are a number of these kind of forums by which you can do that. So for boys in the upper school, which are the 2 years of A-level, there are essays that they're expected to do over the summer holidays, competitions that boys enter. One of the boys I talked to last term entered the Velicop History Prize in Cambridge, which actually won, with an essay on witchcraft in Scotland in the early 17th century. Interesting kind of social topic. And we also teach a course called A-Level Plus, which is an ability, sometimes filling in the gaps between A-levels. In some ways, subjects haven't changed hugely, you might say for 100 years or more. And how do you, if you want to go and read law, or you think that's something you're interested in a later career, we don't do law as an A-level, yet you could do a course which might, drawing on your experience maybe as a historian or doing English or something like that, that begins to think about the nature of law and the subjects, questions that might arise from it. Or there's another one on engineering, there's another one on cities and the imagination. And I think they can often fill in the gaps between A-levels and give that rich sort of landscape beyond often the very specialized courses that A-levels include. And I think your ability to juggle these things with the demands of A-level, again, require a degree of resilience. And I think that's really important. There's also a balancing act, I think, between your ability to lead, to be something communal, to work together. Something I always try and impress upon, the boys that I teach is, revision. That requires resilience. It's not the most exciting thing, but it's important. And often, if you do it as a communal activity, it can be extraordinarily enriching and carry you through your preparation for exams at school, university, whatever. But also, you're an individual too, and I think that ability to think for yourself and to stand out from the crowd. I think it's very hard being a teenager. You suddenly or gradually become aware that the crowd, the group, is the thing that you want to be a part of. And I always think, say to them in assemblies, one of the great things about getting older is you stop worrying what other people think about you. And I think that's really hard for a teenager to do. And again, that degree of resilience of being prepared to stand away from the crowd, I think is something which is really important as well. And a degree of kind of character which goes with that. And you see that too. Here's a picture of one of the boarding rooms in one of the senior houses. We're a day school. We end at 4 o'clock, 5:30 for after school activities. But for boarders, there's a life in the evenings, and again, that degree which you work together and can study together, I think helps develop that sense of you as a group and that sense of resilience. I was listening to Graeme earlier talking about Abingdon. Of course, many schools are pretty similar. Being involved in things outside lessons, I think, is incredibly important, again, in terms of how you manage your time, but I think also how you kind of develop character, to stand on stage and perform in a play or sing. This is a Founders Day concert in the outdoor stage, great showman, Louis, or indeed, acting together in a concert. I think it's in the Festival Hall about a year ago, where we performed with our two other schools in our foundation, Alains and Jags, combined concert. And sport, leading a team, how do you're losing, and how do you try and get your teammates to renew their effort to prepare for what's going to happen afterwards. I think that all of those things help to develop resilience, as does competitions. I think this is house athletics. on our track taking place. I think if you can get involved in these things and the breadth of what schools like Dulwich and Abingdon have to offer, then I think it helps you to develop that character and how you're going to juggle all those competing demands that you have as a student, as a teenager, and ambition. You know, I did a PhD, and I think one of the most difficult things there was halfway through sort of thinking, I don't really know what I'm doing. And finding that sort of inner steel to keep going, to think about it again, and then to find a path through when, you know, you don't have these huge support networks. But by then, through all these other things I've talked about, I think you have found that kind of strength of character, if you like, to do those things which are difficult, and where you can't necessarily see that there is an end point, or by time or by the location or something that you want to get to. And I think all of those things kind of lead you through to, well, what am I going to do after school? And I think, you know, there are lots of questions about that. I mean, I think a lot of people don't really know what they want to do, but they can talk to older boys. You know, what are you going to do? I was going to talk a bit later about the Old Boys Association, the Alumni Club, and a sense that, you know, the connections that you can have and the guidance you can have, which I think can be really helpful. So what I thought here was really just to talk a little bit about, I think, the questions you as parents probably want to ask in terms of, well, what does the school do to prepare people for their next journey after they've left? So at Dulwich, I thought you can see all these figures on our website and the whole list and the subjects they're doing across several years. But I just picked out the biggest universities that we've sent boys to last year. Obviously changes a little bit from year to year. And I think, you know, I guess one of the questions is, you know, is it a school that has experience of sending, preparing candidates for universities in the UK, outside the UK? We, as I'll show you in a minute, you know, have a number of people who prepare boys for applying to American universities. And above all, that sense of the experience you've got of the types of courses that they're going to do and the types of places they're going to go on to. So here at Dulwich, these are the people involved in university applications. I guess one of the things that I would pick out is a new appointment, Jake, who's just arrived at the college. He's American, his experience is in American universities, and he's assisting Mr. Ratnazabapathy to support boys applying to American universities in particular. And I, as a teacher, am what's called a UCAS scrutineer. So I've been allocated one form, so I've got about 12 boys in it. And not only is the form tutor going through those forms with them, I'm seeing them as a sort of independent person. It's a science form, most of them applying to read chemistry, engineering, maths at university. I'm a history teacher, but that doesn't matter. It's a sense of, you know, the outward eye looking at those applications, you know, picking out, I don't think that phrase is terribly clear to me. Maybe not being a chemist might be helpful in that sense. And therefore, I think it's that depth of experience and support you as a family and your son will get applying to university, something I think worth having a look at through websites and things, and you get a sense of the kind of balance they've got as, you know, where people are going and the types of courses they're doing, which I think you should find pretty helpful. We also want boys to kind of ask questions themselves. And so we have various moments of meetings where, these are two of them, you can ask questions of people. So we have a Courses and Careers Convention in February each year. That aims really to do three things. For the younger boys, and I know, you know, we're looking at entry maybe at year 9, year 10, is what sort of A-level should I do? And so all the A-level departments are there. On top of that, there are the universities and also careers, companies there. So, you know, if I want to be an architect, how does this all knit together in terms of A-levels, universities, work experience and things that I can kind of ask people about. And then we have a festival for overseas universities. As you can see, a list of the countries and the universities in it that are represented. If you're thinking of, education's now a global commodity, and an increasing number of boys are looking at going abroad to do those courses. Dulwich is a big school. There are about 220 boys in a year group in the upper school. And there are, therefore, I think about 8,000 Oldalanians in London, and we think there are about 12,000, not totally sure, around the world. And I think a good question to ask and look at is the support networks that go with being an alumni of a school. This is from our website. You can have a look at, read up about these things in more detail. But the Alane Club is there for all Oldalanians. It's a global thing. There's a Hong Kong branch. When staff go up there, they meet up with OAs in Hong Kong. And I think it's that sense of networks, which often connects back to universities. If there are 15 OAs each year going to Bristol, you've got 45 of them, across 3 years who can support the new ones who are coming in. And I think that can be really helpful in terms of finding your feet, making sure you're doing the right course, asking the right questions, and that sort of thing. Obviously, we really want you to come and visit Dulwich. A bit difficult at the moment. There's a virtual tour on our website, which will give you a sense of what a lot of the spaces on the inside look like, and that's being developed further. There's a second phase of that particular tour being developed in October, so keep having a look at that. We do have a few dates for applications. We normally take about 15 boys in at year 9, about 5 into year 10, and about 20 to 30 in at 16 plus. These are the applications essentially for the middle school, for years 9 and 10. So the deadline for applications is the 2nd of October, and the examination day in Hong Kong will be on the 1st of November. There's a QR card there if you want to kind of get that. Have a look on our website. We've got one person in the admissions department dealing specifically with overseas applications. So please, called Anita. So please drop Anita a line if you've got any questions. And we really look forward to hearing from you. And I think we've then got about 10 minutes left for any questions that you may want to ask. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Nick, and thank you for your presentation as well. So we'll begin the Q&A session of your presentation. And to our viewers, if you do have any questions, please do type in your questions in the Q&A box. So I'll begin now. The first question is, you actually already mentioned that the years of entry at Dulwich. Now, do you accept any other years of entry besides the 2 years or 3 years you just mentioned?
Very similar to Abingdon, and we wouldn't take boys in at year 11 and year 13. There simply isn't time to do the courses that you're going to sit exams in at the end of in the summer term of those years. We do take a few boys. There are usually we have a big day entry at 11 plus. We do take some boarders. There's usually about sort of 3 or 4 come in at 11 plus. So 11, 13, 14 going into year 10, and 16 for the upper school. We have our own upper school registrar who deals with just those 16 plus applications. So there are people who can specifically answer any questions you've got. So the nature of admissions is a little bit different at 16. So you're tested in the subjects that you want to do at A level, whereas in year 9, year 10 entry, you'll sit papers basically in maths and English, do a reasoning test, and those are standard for all entry.
Thank you, Nick. And next question is, do you guys take day school applications from Hong Kong students?
We do. So if you're looking for a day place for 13 plus, so year 9 entry, that's our big point of entry, 11 plus, 13 plus for day boys. The entrance exam is in London. It's usually the last Saturday in January of year 8. And you would need to be there for that exam then. If you're coming in from overseas, we would normally then give you an interview the day before because normally boys sit the entrance exam in late January, and then we interview the London boys, as it were, in early February. And obviously the practicalities of hanging around or flying backwards and forwards mean that we would interview overseas boys looking for a day place in that late January slot.
Sure, understood. And I'm just asking, if you are asking about the deadlines and the applications for beyond next year, are they usually similar each year?
They're pretty similar every year. Normally we would, I mean, this year we're not, we send a group of staff out to Hong Kong in our October half term, organise meetings, a little bit like this, you know, so people can ask questions and things. We're not doing that this year, but that again, we would be expecting to do that next year. But these dates are pretty standard for Hong Kong, yeah.
Thanks, Nick. The next question is, Dulwich does have a few campuses outside of the UK. Now, for those students that do go to the schools or want to transfer to the schools, for example, the Shanghai schools, is there any direct transfer, or is there any kind of advantage to go to those schools and then look and want to go into the boarding school in the UK?
No, I mean, all boys, whether they're at, you know, some of the DC schools, say in Shanghai or Beijing or wherever, they would still have to sit our entrance exams. There's no sort of automatic transfer across. Obviously, you know, their schools we know, their teachers and their administrative staff are people that we know. So in that sense, I guess it's easier for us to pick up the phone and have a chat about them than they would be from other schools. But there's no sense in which they get automatic entry or indeed preferential treatment or anything. You know, they would have to sit exactly the same entrance exams into the college that anybody else would.
Thank you, Nick. Another question is, I guess this is more of a general question, but when people refer to students or boys from Dulwich, what are the key kind of phrases or things that people associate with Dulwich, just a reputation in the UK?
Where does it sit? It's obviously it's a big school. It's a well-established school with, you know, is fairly academically selective. I think some of its distinctive features would be it has for a very long time had a large number of boys who are supported to be at the school. So they're on bursaries. So we are socially a much more diverse school than probably quite a lot in our sector, if you like.
Sure.
There's about a third of the boys on some sort of fee relief. As a London day school, we also reflect the population of London, which is, as you know, a pretty kind of global city. So as you see probably in a lot of the photographs, you know, they are a pretty diverse bunch of boys. And I think we'd like to think they've got their feet firmly on the ground and kind of deal with anybody around them. You know, we don't want them to be too much sort of in a bubble of their own specialness, if you like, you know, and I don't think that's very helpful for the planet. And I think those character skills are something we think are really important in terms of being future citizens, really.
Sure. Thank you. And I believe we may have time for just one more question. Now, just back to admissions again, because we do have a lot of questions about that. Now, if a student does get into the school and is given an offer, how long do you hold that offer for?
So the offer that goes out will have, we need to hear back from families within, I think we give them about a month to let us know what they would like to do. They then have to obviously pay a deposit to secure the place. This year has obviously been somewhat fluid, shall we say, in terms of being able to travel around the world. And I think actually the school has been, you know, reasonably flexible in terms of boys arriving late, deferring their entry maybe for a term, with us trying to support them, obviously with online teaching while they are waiting to come to the college. But generally, I think, you know, families would have about a month to let us know if Dulwich is a school that they wish to accept.
Sure. And Nick, I believe that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for your presentation. Now, before I let you go, do you have any last words for our guests?
No, it's been a real pleasure, working with you. You taught me through, as I said to you, I'm not the most technically advanced person, so I'm very grateful to you for making sure that it all works so smoothly. So thank you very much, and good luck to everybody. Lots of great schools in Britain, and I'm sure that you'll all find the one that you really feel chimes with you and your family. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick, for your informative presentation.
Cheers, no problem. Bye-bye.
Bye. The next speaker will be Howard Tuckett, Headmaster of Wycombe Abbey School, Hong Kong. Howard trained as a teacher in Natal, South Africa. He has taught in independent schools in South Africa, Botswana, England, and now Hong Kong. Over the last 20 years, Howard has been a preparatory school headmaster at St. Joseph's College in Suffolk, Caterham School in Surrey, and is currently the founding headmaster of Wycombe Abbey School, Hong Kong. Before moving to Hong Kong, Howard served as an ISI inspector and was a governor at 2 British independent schools. Howard is married with 2 children. Welcome, Howard.
Thank you very much, Helen. And I'm just going to get the right screen, having watched everybody else deal with the technology. There we go. Can you see me all right, Helen? Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you very much. And again, a very real thank you to all our speakers, those who've already joined us and those who are yet to come. It's my great pleasure to bring Wycombe Abbey, Hong Kong to you this afternoon and to be able to talk to you about what is essentially a British prep school that is here in Hong Kong for Hong Kongers. As you'll see in one of the slides a little later on, we are not an international school in Hong Kong. Wycombe Abbey School in Hong Kong is a private school, and this has a significance in that we're not restricted at all by any level of quotas of Hong Kongers as compared to expatriate children. So we bring an independent British prep school for everybody in Hong Kong, but one that is offering a curriculum based on the British national curriculum, so our children follow exactly the same curriculum as they would do in a British prep school in Britain, preparing for one of the great schools that you're hearing about. But of course, we're in Hong Kong, so we teach Chinese very well at the same time. Our model of pupil that we're envisaging going through this school, and time will tell, but this is certainly the feedback we're getting, are very capable, well-to-do, ambitious Hong Kongers and expatriates going through Wycombe Abbey School, Hong Kong, either going to one of the great secondary schools in Hong Kong or going off to a boarding school in the United Kingdom or possibly even the United States, but ultimately coming back to Hong Kong or this part of Southeast Asia for their adult lives. Of course, everybody's going to have a different story, but this is a kind of model around which we have designed a school, a British prep school for all Hong Kongers. Our original parent school, as you can see in this picture, Wycombe Abbey, were with us last week. The headmistress, Jo Duncan, one of her seniors, a former student, and the head girl were all on this webinar this time last week, and we're sharing with you about Wycombe Abbey, and I hope that those of you who were with us last week enjoyed that presentation. Wycombe Abbey itself is more than 100 years old, and it is one of the leading academic independent schools, or in fact one of the leading academic schools in the United Kingdom. It is unashamedly an academic school, but as you've heard from the other speakers, as Abingdon referred to the other half, the other schools, myself included, we talk about extracurricular, enriching holistic education. Wycombe Abbey in the UK is also a very notable sports school. They're particularly famous for the level of their lacrosse. They have a very impressive swimming pool, 20 tennis courts, and so on and so forth. So again, like all of the other schools you're hearing about, Wycombe Abbey Girls' School, it's a girls' school in the UK, only a secondary school. It's all about educating the entire pupil, the young ladies heading off into their adult professional lives. And of course, they go on to great secondary, great university options. And you can see the notes there, some of the notable universities that they feed into regularly. Here in Hong Kong, we are here in Aberdeen on the south side of Hong Kong Island, the main island, and a little town called Tin Wan, which is just off to the side of Aberdeen, as if you're heading round on the Prior Road round towards Pok Folang. We have a beautiful campus, over 4 floors, and the beauty of this project is that it's a new construction. It's actually been converted from a shopping centre, so it's not a new construction, but it's a new model within an existing construction, and it's designed purely for primary education. We do not have an infant or a kindergarten facility here, and we do not have a secondary facility here beyond the age of 13, so going into year 9. So the school runs from British Year 1, children join us at the age of 5, and will run through to year 8, so 13 plus. So both of the speakers before me, Nick at Dulwich and Graeme at Abingdon, have mentioned that their boarding starts at, I think, Dulwich at 11, but certainly boarding starts at Abingdon at 13. And as parents investigating boarding in the UK, again, this is another little step. Be very careful not to trip over this one. Do check at which year schools start boarding. Many schools that take day pupils at a younger age group, maybe even have a junior school, may only start boarding at 13. So do check, and of course by speaking to me here at Wycombe Abbey, Hong Kong, or contacting any of these schools directly. This is one of the very basic points you might just want to check up on. Anyway, back to us here. We are a co-educational primary school. Important to point out we are co-educational because, of course, Wycombe Abbey in England is a girls' school. Wycombe Abbey International here in Hong Kong, and with 3 other much bigger schools than this one in mainland China, are all co-educational. Sometimes other people speak about the school, so they speak about me. So let me tell you a little about myself. As you heard in the introduction, I've been a career prep school teacher and headmaster in the United Kingdom, and it's been one of the privileges of my life to be invited to come here to Hong Kong to found this branch of the Wycombe Abbey project, if I may say, to open Wycombe Abbey Hong Kong. We're currently in our second year, our second academic year, and the school is flourishing. It's going very well, and I would encourage you to get in touch if you're in Hong Kong and come and have a visit. Let us take you around. But that's all about me, but I think we've probably said all that already. We believe in teaching the whole child. As both speakers before me have mentioned, we're not just an academic factory. Typical of British independent education, dare I say, one of the finest education models in the world. We know that success comes from having well-adapted children who are confident in themselves. We use the word happy probably too liberally in all senses. We're not looking for happy in terms of just happy tripping around, not doing very much, but we're looking for children who fit their skins, who are confident in themselves, have enough of a challenge ahead of them to be stimulated, but not so much of a challenge that becomes destructive. And we find that by measuring and assessing the entire child at all stages of their development, because of course child development is a huge part of primary education, in that you're not dealing with the same child at 13 that you dealt with when they were 5. They are almost unrecognizable in what they can achieve, what they can do, what their outlook on life. Of course, very young children are very inward looking. It's all about me, me, me. And as they grow up, they become more aware of people around them. And so their outlook on life, their view on life changes accordingly. And it's important that we track each of these stages. Now, the 12 points that are in the blue column of this slide, these are the 12 objectives that people like Helen and Donna Marie, who you've met this afternoon, and our many other colleagues here at the school, we are constantly assessing our children, not only academically, but against these 12 areas, these objectives. How is the child, let's call them, I don't know, Freddie, how is Freddie doing against all of these points at this point in time, whichever year they're in, however they're doing, whatever their family situation is, whatever their academic situation is, whatever their health, their rate of development, how are they tracking against these objectives? And so we can assess the whole child. Academic assessment, of course, famously, the bit that you, mum and dad, get to see is what do they get in a test? Well, that's only a very small part of assessment. In assessment, we're also constantly assessing what a child's cognitive ability is. What is their mental capacity for academic work, which leads on to telling us how much we can reasonably expect from each child, which allows us to set the appropriate level of academic challenge so that we're drawing them along by offering the right level of academic challenge so that it is still a challenge, it's still hard. They've got to do the, as Nick was saying just now, they've got to do the revision, they've got to sit down and do the hard stuff. But what we're asking them to do isn't impossible. It's been pitched at just the right level of challenge for them so that if they do engage well, if they are studying as they've been taught to study, if they are well supported, they will achieve and they will experience success. And boy, there's nothing like success for stimulating somebody. Nobody does well in life if they've been constantly beaten down. Anybody will do well in life if they have experienced success and they've just got that huge boost of energy because they've really done something significant and now they're ready to move on to the next challenge. This is how we entice and support children through their primary education, helping them to become expert learners so that when they get to these great secondary schools, either here in Hong Kong or the UK or wherever else they may go, they have the toolkit, they have the mental strength, the mental agility, and they've experienced what it means to engage with a challenge at school and achieve real success. As I've already said, we are a private school, not an international school, and I spoke a little about our curriculum. We follow a curriculum based on the British national curriculum, the national curriculum for England and Wales, and it's been tempered. I know this because I was the one who had the privilege of being able to put our curriculum together. I tempered it with the common entrance curriculum. Now, parents, common entrance is, if you like, the standard 11+ examination. Very few schools, independent schools, actually use common entrance in its fullest sense. All of them are aware of it, and all of them tend to refer to it to get the level that they're going to set their 11+ and 13+ entry examinations at. Sometimes people who are teaching much older children, maybe sixth form all the time, are not quite sure where to pitch a real effective 11+ examination for maybe children 5, 6 years older than the older teenagers they're teaching. And so, of course, common entrance gives them a very good sounding board, a very good standard. There are some schools that use common entrance in its purest form. Other schools, many of them, I would say the majority, tend to use their own 11+ and 13+ assessments. But the common entrance gives us a really good syllabus for preparing children for 11+ and 13+. The common entrance syllabus is not different to the national curriculum of England and Wales, but it's enriched. It expects more detail. It expects more engagement, if you like, than the standard curriculum. And then the third strand of the curriculum that I brought in meshing, if you like, 3 strands of 3 great curricula to offer this Wycombe Abbey Hong Kong curriculum. The third strand I brought in was from the local Hong Kong EDB primary curriculum. Another wonderful curriculum, really rich, really broad. It offers a lot. It challenges at just the right levels, and it's very well thought out. Having read it in great detail, I'm a great fan of it. So by merging the EDB primary curriculum, the English net curriculum for England, Wales, and the common entrance enrichment of that, I've woven all 3 together. And this is the curriculum that we follow. On the next slide, you'll see the subjects we cover. So our curriculum is bespoke, it's tailor-made, and it comes back to what I was saying at the beginning, that we offer a British prep school for Hong Kong children. Children at Wycombe Abbey, Hong Kong will follow exactly the same curriculum as children in Britain do at all the great prep schools there, in preparation for British boarding schools. And of course, that also prepares them for the great schools that are in Hong Kong. And many of those head teachers and myself are in contact with each other. Ultimately, we intend to build our own secondary school, and plans are afoot to bring Wycombe Abbey Secondary School, which will be a co-educational day and boarding school, with a separate junior school attached to it, in addition to this one, up in the New Territories. Discussions are going on about the site at the moment, but that will take some years to come through. So here are the subjects that we teach. English and Chinese take about half the week's teaching time. We have such an investment in the teaching of Chinese, but we are not a bilingual school. We are an English medium school. English is spoken throughout the school all the time, unless we're in a Chinese lesson. We have dedicated exactly the same amount of time to Chinese in terms of teaching time as we do to English. And in addition to that, we pump 2 teachers into every lesson every day for every class when it's time for Chinese. So children are doing high quality Chinese every day. We are already well into our 2nd year. The feedback is that children are making as good, if not better progress. Those that have moved to us from government primary schools, that they are moving, certainly not dropping behind, and some of them are going faster than they were before, but we're using this much more holistic, dare I say, less pressurized, less intense way of teaching Chinese. And I'll come on to a little more detail about that in a moment. The model for the teachers we employ is that they should be trained in the United Kingdom or somewhere similar. In other words, that they should have trained and be experienced in a teaching environment that is either on the British national curriculum or in a country that is similar. And similar countries would be Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Canada, and even some of the states of the United States, but the various states do vary. When we started the school just over a year ago, half the staff were physically moved out from England. The other half of the teaching staff were all British trained teachers or similar who were already in Hong Kong and were coming to the end of contracts at other schools and moved to us. So our core teaching team are mostly British trained teachers, a couple of rogues like myself who were trained in South Africa, Australians, New Zealanders, and of course the Chinese teaching team who are either from mainland China or from Hong Kong and train there and bring their expertise and their specialism to us. Part of the teaching, as you will appreciate from the earlier slides I showed you, it's not just about the academics. Part of the teaching is all about supporting the whole child. So you'll see on this slide that it's absolutely critical that we have a supportive classroom environment. Our classrooms are not places where children are scared to be or anxious to come to. They look forward to them. The news that we've been able to open next week has been received so gratefully by all the pupils who we've had online every day. We're particularly pleased that we've been able to open for full days. We're able to open for full days for our year 6, 5, 4s and 3s next week, and the following week, like other schools in Hong Kong, our second wave of entry will come from our junior children, our year 2s and 1s. But Wycombe Abbey, Hong Kong is open for full day teaching from next week, and we're delighted to be able to offer that to Hong Kong. And part of that full day care is looking after children for a full day, giving them that well-rounded pastoral care, that we're looking after the whole person for all the reasons I mentioned before. I think I've probably covered everything that's on this slide in that we're a British school, a British-based model school. We speak English as the medium of instruction, but Chinese is taught very well. And you can see the points here. And do come back to us. Do please get in touch. At the end of this conversation, there will be a slide with all our contact details. And by virtue of the fact you're on the webinar, you know how to get hold of us. So do please get in touch. We have a separate whole webinar on how we teach Chinese. And our head of Chinese, our deputy head, Ms. Jenny Chen, will be very happy to speak to you. But you can see the main points here on this slide. Of course, being a prep school, a significant part of our role is helping those children who are going off to these great British boarding schools to help them prepare. This slide is taken from a school who actually aren't joining us today. This is Priors Field, a wonderful girls' school in Surrey. A good friend of mine here in the picture is the resident housemaster. He and his wife run the boarding, and you can see 2 girls who are international boarders at Priors Field here. You can always tell Priors Field with their bright green and pink colours. And coming back to us and how we prepare your children to enter schools, like all the wonderful schools we've been hearing from, it's part of what we do. The critical point is, if we know we've got a child preparing for British boarding, and we already have quite a lot, We don't put them on some special program. We don't have to find them extra coaching. We don't have to do this, that, or the next thing because they've got some big challenge that we don't know how to deal with. Everything we've got at this school and everything we do at this school will prepare a child for entry to British independent schools, whether they're day schools or boarding schools, or to any of the great secondary schools here in Hong Kong, or mum and dad, wherever your career is going to take you, Singapore, Australia, the States, Canada, wherever you're going. I'm talking to heads around the world every week as we look at transfer options. And of course, there's a lot of information to be gleaned, and we can help you with that. One of the best points to start with when you're considering schools is to consider the fact, and of course, one of the big fears that we have as parents is we're looking at sending our children halfway around the world to these schools. Some of them are very old. They've got beautiful buildings, great reputations, but there's no getting around it. Britain and Hong Kong are quite different cultures to each other. It's asking a lot of an 11-year-old or a 13-year-old to move halfway around the world, leave home, and just drop into one of these sometimes quite intimidating, beautiful campuses, and just expect them to get on with it. It takes a lot of preparation, and we're working with parents and pupils for years. 5, 6 years of age. Once parents think they want to know a little about how this might work, we go to work together with parents, helping them prepare. One of the things, mum and dads, know about British boarding schools is that they are very well regulated. All of these schools belong to professional organizations. You can see some of the key ones listed on the banner below. And those organizations are so highly thought of by Her Majesty's Inspector, by Ofsted, but they actually have their own independent schools inspectorate called the ISI. You've heard the ISI mentioned several times this afternoon. Graeme May is an ISI inspector, I'm an ISI inspector, and various other people who you've heard of who also work for the ISI. These schools are so well regulated. There is a document of boarding school regulations, which is pages and pages thick, and every school has to fulfill and surpass these regulations, and the ISI are very hot. Every school's website will have its latest ISI inspection on it. If you're looking at schools, if you're considering schools, one of the things you have to do, would be my advice, is go and find their latest inspection reports, probably the last two, because there are two types of inspection and one follows after the other. So actually 2 reports give you a full picture. And if you need any help interpreting those inspection reports, or what does this mean, what does that mean, if you're not sure, do please get in touch with me. I'd be happy to host you here at Wycombe Abbey. We'd have a cup of coffee together and I would take you through the ISI report. So as we help you prepare your child, we're going through all of these things in the red blocks, helping you select schools, helping you with your application strategy, helping you prepare for interview. Of course, entry to these schools is not just about academics. The interviews, as you would have picked up from Graeme and Nick, schools are interested in the whole person, And as we hear from Harry Hammond and from William Rees, who are going to be speaking after me, and indeed from Jen Ma, who's the speaker after me, they'll be talking to you about this holistic application process. The academics are very important, but there are other aspects to the entry procedure, and interview forms quite a large, interview is a good practical method for the schools to find out more about the children they're looking for places for. So do parents be advised to pay as much attention preparing for these other aspects of entry as well as just the academics. We have members of staff here, and here's a picture of a meeting, helping our pupils who are thinking about boarding. And this discussion going on here with our member of staff here and 2 of our pupils is all about what it's going to be like to be a boarder. What things do we need to start thinking about? You can see they're still quite young, and they're a year or 2 away from leaving us to going off to British boarding schools. But we are supporting the children all the way through. Our school, of course, offers all kinds of primary excellence. You can see the school hall here on the right. You can see the cutaway building. In other slides, these are 2 of our classrooms. Helen Wood, who's on the call at the moment, you can see her famous stripy tent in her Year 1 classroom. And do go onto our website. We have a virtual tour on the website, which was constructed by our bursar, Jeremy Young. It's a wonderful example of the model of the virtual tours. And you can go all through the school, and there are helpful little video clips to help you see and find out more about our school. But of course, none of that would actually be preferable to you. There we are. This is our drone racing room. The children race drones that they're building through these hoops. It's a bit like electronic Quidditch. But do come and visit us. This is our rooftop garden outdoor area we use for outdoor activities. Our school day, pretty normal school day, really. We start teaching just after 8. The school day finishes at 3. And then we have 2 one-hour extracurricular activity sessions every day. And we're offering in the region of 30, I think it's now 32, extracurricular activities, again, reinforcing all the things that the previous 2 speakers have talked about, as well as our very broad holistic day. We offer all of these activities and clubs. The thought is, parents, you might be relieved to know we've designed a school where your child comes to school in the morning, and when they get home in the evening after 5 o'clock, they've done all their lessons, they've done all the clubs, activities, music, rock climbing, dancing, singing, taekwondo. They've also done their homework, because homework period is also available in the after school activities. You can sign up and go to homework club. You can come home, the homework's done, and your evening is for the family. The application process is really simple. Do just contact us. You'll see the contacts at the end of this presentation. We do put children through an academic assessment. We are an academically rigorous school, and we need to know that it's going to be fair to the child, that they will be able to keep up. I think we've already covered that point, and there are contact details. Wallace, I'll come back to you. I believe we've got a few minutes for questions.
Thank you, Howard. Yes, so we'll begin the Q&A session now, and I'll start asking some of these questions. First one is, we see that year 1 to year 6 is offered at Wycombe Abbey School. Will you be opening year 7 and year 8? And what about senior school plans?
Yes, thank you. So year 7 and year 8 will be opening next year, Key Stage 3, so that we follow this standard British prep school model, that children can stay with us and go off to their senior schools at 11. But if, like I was saying, they're going to a boarding school, particularly that starts at 13, they can stay with us and prepare for entry at 13 plus here in Hong Kong. You wouldn't need to go to a British prep school just for the last 2 years, where it's probably going to be quite hard to break into the group of children just for those last 2 years. They can stay here in Hong Kong with us, prepare for their entry to their senior school, and leave us at 13. And as I said a little earlier, we are looking to build a secondary school. If you want an idea of what our secondary school would look like, the sort of size of campus I'm talking about, do have a look at our Wycombe Abbey Changzhou website, and you'll see that we're talking about vast campuses, loads of sports fields. All of the Wycombe Abbeys have water frontages. Rowing is offered at all of the Wycombe Abbey schools, and I shouldn't think ours will be any different. So for something that big, it's going to have to be in the new territories. And the final discussions to actually agree on the site are taking place at the moment. And we hope to be able to make an announcement about our senior school project very soon.
Thank you, Howard. The next question is, you mentioned earlier the subjects that are being taught at Wycombe Abbey School, Hong Kong. Now, what years are these subjects offered at?
Thank you. Yeah, all subjects are offered at all years, age appropriately. So by age appropriately, we don't teach history as a discrete subject in year 1, but there is a history content, and it's blended with the geography and the religious education, and it's called content. And all of the topics that are listed under those subjects separately, the teachers very expertly blend them in to sort of bite-size projects that younger children can work with, and as I said before, experience some success, give them a good grounding to when these subjects a little later on in the timetable become discrete lessons at about year 3 and year 4.
Thank you, Howard. And I do think we have time for about one more question. Now, last question is, how is the admission process like, and are you currently taking immediate transfers?
Yes, our admissions process, we work very hard at it. In fact, Wallace is asking me the questions, is in charge of it. We've worked really hard to make sure that our admissions process is as easy as possible. When I came to Hong Kong, I was quite surprised to find how hard and how stressful it is to get into schools. And I determined to make it as easy and as stress-free as possible. The first thing we did to remove stress was we took all the money out of it. Application to Wycombe Abbey School, Hong Kong is free. Assessment to Wycombe Abbey School, Hong Kong is free. And if I have my way, it'll stay that way. We don't need to be taking money from people just to assess their children. At the moment, we're a developing school. Our school is growing very fast. It has trebled in size in just its first year. We now have 3 classes in year one. We have 3 classes in year 2, and I'm about to split year 3 and year 4 into multiple classes as well. At the moment, though, we have places in most years, probably less so in year 1 and 2 at the moment. Those are filling fast. In the older years, we have places still, but that situation isn't going to last forever. So I think to come to Wycombe Abbey now, the decision is it morally right for the child to come to the school? Are they going to cope? And it'll be a yes or a no based on that. But already by this time next year, I anticipate that the question is going to be, I've got 6 children in one place, which child is doing best? And it will become competitive by necessity, like all other good independent schools do. Thanks, Wallace.
Thank you, Howard. And I believe that's all the time we have for this presentation now. Before I let you go, do you have any words for our guests?
Well, certainly, yes. Thank you for your time this afternoon, everybody. And do enjoy the rest of the presentation, the rest of the webinar. It's been a great pleasure to collate all of this together, to find all these speakers for you, and I hope you found it useful. And do please use us. We are a British prep school here in Hong Kong for you, for all Hong Kongers, to help your primary age children prepare for their secondary life, no matter where that may be. And that includes an expertise in preparing them for entry to British independent schools. Do look on the website, do contact us here, and I look forward very much to meeting you. So many people from the previous 2 Saturdays have emailed me, phoned me up over the last 2 weeks with all kinds of questions, and I've been delighted, even though you're not actually at the school, delighted to sort of point you in the right direction and suggest who you might speak to here in Hong Kong or in the UK. So I'm going to hand over now. I believe Jennifer Ma from Arch Education is following me, and I know you're going to enjoy her talk. And thank you very much. And I'll see you all right at the end of this afternoon's webinar.
Thank you so much, Howard, for your very helpful, clear and informative presentation, and for outlining the very diverse and holistic curriculum offered at Wycombe Abbey, Hong Kong. Our next speaker will be Jennifer Ma, the co-founder and director of Arch Education. Jennifer Ma attended top schools, St Paul's Co-Educational College in Hong Kong and Abingdon School in the UK, before graduating from the University of Oxford with first-class honours in economics and management. Jennifer achieved her master's degree in education at the University of Hong Kong and is a co-author of the bestseller, Boarding Schools, All You Need to Know. Jennifer is a Abingdon School trustee, China-Oxford Scholarship Fund panellist, and is part of the University of Oxford, Pembroke College, Ossulston Circle. At Arch, Jennifer is responsible for the development of enrichment programmes. She leads the UK and Hong Kong consultation teams, which specialise in applications for Oxbridge, and professional subjects including medicine, law and architecture. Welcome, Jennifer Ma.
Thank you very much, Howard and Donna Marie. Can you hear me? Yes, and can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Right, I just want to check to make sure. Okay, hello all parents and students. Thank you very much to Wycombe Abbey Hong Kong for inviting me to deliver this presentation. And I'm very excited to share on the more practical side of the preparation process in applying to UK boarding schools. So I myself went at the age of 12 and my brother went at the age of 10. So we are definitely champions and advocates of the UK system. So today, oops, let me just see. Okay, so I'll go through a quick introduction of Arch so that you understand where our experience comes from. And then the bulk of the presentation would be on the latest insights of trends, what have changed for the top boarding school admissions, as the top boarding schools will set the trend for how UK boarding schools in general assess students. be it timeline changes, the layers of testing, the diversity of actual assessment coverage, interview questions, which a lot of parents ask about, and progressional pathways that one might want to take into account. Then I will wrap up by talking about the 6-step preparation if parents are hoping to apply for some of these more selective UK boarding schools. ARCH does a lot of things. Our mission is to bridge the education gaps in skills. So we do thinking, speaking, reading, writing programs for students aged 7 to 14. We also help students prepare for boarding schools and universities abroad. Today we'll be focusing on boarding schools. And then we're also the only education center in Asia that is approved by a university. So we're the teaching faculty of University of London. What that means is, the registered teaching institution of University of London. What that means is all the results we publicly share have to be 100% accurate. So, so some of the results over the past 8-9 years. A lot of great results into universities, but very interesting last year in particular, we got 93% of our students who engage us for ongoing guidance into top boarding schools in the UK, got into the top 11 boarding schools, with 85% of them getting unconditional offers or scholarships. So today we'll be sharing on how we help these students who really come from many different backgrounds, and we help them bridge the pathways. And here are some examples. So whether it's directly from local schools or international schools to UK, US universities, or those who actually transition between local to international, or those who actually transition to boarding schools first before going abroad in the same region. And the most complex cases would be those who go abroad to one region for boarding school, then switch to another region for university. So in any case, it really takes our expertise to help parents and students navigate the transition process. So we tend to take a macro view of students' profiles in accounting for mid-long-term considerations. What that means is we don't just advise students just because they want to go to a particular region that, to help them prepare for that particular region. We take a macro view to see if that region is actually right for them, whether they should actually consider other regions. Should they even stay in Hong Kong for a bit longer before they go abroad? Are they ready? So much more macro view. Also, we have our own UK senior consultants who are themselves former heads of schools and boarding schools and prep schools who go around schools in the UK for annual visits. We are definitely on the preparation side as opposed to processing side. So we're not an agent, so we don't help with all the filling in the forms, but our expertise lies with helping students ace the preparation for the academic side of the assessments. Of course, because we are not agencies, we do not represent any schools and we don't take commission from any schools. So our recommendations tend to be very objective. University application students are really our first-hand insights because we help a lot of them apply for universities. So what that means is, and they're currently students at boarding schools, so they give us a lot of insights as to what's exactly happening currently at some of these schools. So boarding school admissions, the latest insights of trends, I'll go through each one of them one by one. So here are just some of the more selective schools, but there are many, and Wycombe Abbey Hong Kong has managed to invite many of them to join this iFestival. The top few are all boys, the middle few are all girls, and then the bottom few are examples of co-ed schools. So they really differ by gender, by size, by environmental exposure. Some of them are actually in cities, some of them are in rural areas. The history could be very different, even the architectural design is very different, curriculum is very different, university destinations could vary. For example, Sevenoaks is very international. Nearly 20-30% of them go to other regions to pursue universities. Now, all this actually does reflect in their admissions process because they will be looking for, as Howard mentioned just now, a different personality or a particular fit, what they call a particular spark in a child. So whether your child is right for the school will also assess that for themselves. But then when it comes to admissions, all these schools are also different by number of places they have on offer each year. The selectiveness could vary. Selection criteria can be different. Assessment types are different. But most importantly, the time frame for pre-registration is also different. So a lot of parents get very confused, even with the actual logistical timeline. And we have had students who apply to all girls schools, for example, in the UK, and ending up having to fly 4 times in 4 months just to attend these assessment days. So first of all, let's talk about timeline requirements and how they differ. So just taking all boys schools as an example, as you can see, depending on the school, they may have different assessment stages. Usually they start with a pre-ISEP test, which has become much more popular these days, to assess students at a young age of 10. And then they may have a school pre-test where it's actually an exam set by the school. Then they may do interviews, and then some schools may do common entrance or proprietary papers, either just for a setting purpose or actually for further selection. So some schools like Harrow and Tunbridge would use agencies for the processing, and most of these other more selective schools don't use agencies. So as you can see, especially for boys, they could assess earlier, despite them going at the age of 13, 14, they may be assessed at age 10, 11. And that's why the prep schools in the UK, and in particular Hong Kong with Wycombe Abbey Hong Kong, is really good at preparing these students for these the transition into these top secondary schools in the UK. And as you can see just from this timeline, and it's a real timeline from a student who is going to school this year, he actually started preparation as early as 2017, so 3-4 years before, because all the pre-tests and all the interview dates and all the assessments are at different times. So it's important that parents are aware before applying. Multi-layers of testing, as you understand, Hong Kong is very much this kind of local school environment. So it's pretty much all assessments are based on grades. But if you look at studying abroad, it's very much this kind of Harkness table, U-shaped table, discussion-based learning. And that is why schools are looking for much more than just grades. They want students to participate. They want them to have the skill sets to survive and enjoy, most importantly, the new learning environment. So look at many things. Obviously, grades would be something as indication, but honestly, for UK boarding schools, not all of them are able to decipher all the different school transcripts and gradings amongst all the different schools in Hong Kong. So they often will have these standardized test scores or these extra examinations like pre-ISEP, UKSET, or school proprietary papers to kind of calibrate students' abilities when they assess them. So it's more of a fair process, and also to ensure that the students' abilities are in line with the UK standards. Essays, especially for sixth form entry, they'll be asking students to write some personal statements, essays, extracurricular activities. Of course, boarding schools, especially UK, they really want the students to be able to immerse and enjoy all facets of boarding school life. So actually having engagements with extracurricular activities will give schools a reassurance that the child will be able to immerse and adapt to the new school setting. And of course, many schools also offer scholarships. So if there's a particular area of talent, then students can also go for scholarships. Interviews are in a different bubble because, as I'll share more later, it comes in different formats and questions could be very different, but all of them for UK boarding schools are conducted by the actual admissions officers, if not sometimes even the director of studies and headmistress, headmasters. Teacher recommendations and transcripts are also important, but then because there are interviews, a lot of these schools actually take the interviews more seriously than on paper reference. Diversity of assessments, many different types of assessments, and they're not all required by all schools, depending on school, depending on age, depending on potentially what subject they may go for if at university, if they are older students applying for 16+. But usually there'll be English comprehension composition, maths, reasoning, verbal, non-verbal reasoning for the younger age. And sometimes they will add sciences for some schools, and occasional schools may have a comprehensive set of assessments, including linguistics, history, RS, and general paper. So with our 10 years of experience working with students every year applying for these schools, some of these common gaps for students in Hong Kong, be it local or international, at times the gap is wider for local school students simply because of first one for English is just skill gaps. A lot of times students are not exposed to the type of comprehension questions, the type of standards. They may be more, for example, prone to writing descriptive writing, but perhaps less analytical writing. And some schools may ask these more advanced questions at a younger age in UK. Exam techniques, of course, will need some exposure there as well. Maths, most Hong Kong students are usually stronger, but then there is that curriculum gap. If you're not following the English UK curriculum, then there are just simply some areas that is not taught at school. So even the very, very bright students may not have been exposed. English terminology, so they may know the maths, but if it's asked in English, they may not understand the question. Reasoning, these questions are not usual type of questions that students in Hong Kong would have come across. So they definitely need exposure to understand at least the fundamental mentality to approach these questions. They are aptitude tests, which means it will come to a point where, you know, even extra tutoring or extra assessments will not help the students improve. But if they have a bit of exposure and practice, then definitely they can get more used to understanding how to tackle these questions. Sciences, again, curriculum gap. A lot of schools in Hong Kong for primary age don't even do sciences properly or actually have it as a separate subject. So it's quite impressive having visited Wycombe Abbey that they have a very strong science and STEM provision. Again, linguistics, history, RS, general paper, the curriculum may not be covered in Hong Kong local system. Just to show you what verbal reasoning means, is basically these patterny type of questions, really hone in on vocabulary, at times grammar. Non-verbal, a lot of these like spatial awareness type of questions, it's kind of the bedrock of quantitative abilities. Spatial awareness, when you do physics and math down the line, you have to be able to visualize. In fact, some subjects like engineering or like medicine, when it comes to an older age group of students applying for universities, they also use exactly the same assessments. So we've done a lot of research in the back end at Arch. I can't show you these results now on PowerPoint through Zoom, but different schools' proprietary papers may entail a slightly different syllabus and exam focus. So we do a lot of research to make sure that, you know, depending on which school the kid goes for, that we are definitely tailored to their preparation. Interview questions format. So this is often an area parents ask if I'm very nervous about, because obviously it's not something that's so easily controlled, because it depends on the child's performance on a day. It's getting a bit more varied. Oftentimes now top schools invite students to fly over because they actually want the child to take a look at the environment themselves as well. It's important that the child likes the school, because ultimately it's not just studying, but you're living there. So being comfortable is important. Being able to immerse in the culture, and so a lot of them do weekend interviews, group activities, group interviews, just to see how they you know, conduct themselves in the school setting. But of course, this is not the luxury that all schools can afford or all parents can afford. So schools often also fly over to Hong Kong to interview students in person on a one-on-one setting. But general questions could cover many different types. Personal standard questions like, you know, why UK boarding? Do you feel you're ready? Why you want to leave your current school, etc. Debates over controversial topics. We have come across students who mentioned that they really want to study history and pick history as a GCSE, and the school would then counter question her, you know, but why do you think you need to take history? Can't you just do that on the side? So it's more like this debating type of questions to see if a student can actually justify their thoughts. Impromptu literature, poetry analysis, this is quite common for some of these schools that are a bit more academic and traditional. So they actually give you a poem on the spot to read and analyze and discuss with you, just to see if your impromptu analysis or discussion is good, because that's exactly how they would conduct teaching in the UK. Alternatives like, you know, bring an object from home and share a little bit with share a little bit about it with me. So it's more about getting to know your personality, abstract questions, see how you can think outside the box. Current affairs, you know, for example, if you could invite someone to dinner, 3 people, dead or alive, who would you invite? Okay, so really just to see if a student is able to bring about people who might be current affairs related or their personality, interest related, engage in that conversation. So again, of course, through all this, it's really about presentation skills and to see if you can bring out the students' personality in a natural way at interview. Just an example here, just to round off this this part. What is this painting trying to tell you? This is really a question posed to one of my 10-year-old students at a relatively top selective all-girls school. And honestly, there's no right or wrong answer. They may have seen this picture, they may have not, but it doesn't really matter. And after the student shared her view, then they asked her, you know, if you were to give this painting a topic, a title, a name, what would it be? So, so quite interesting how they seek out the child's thinking process. So 6-step preparation, as mentioned earlier, this year we ongoing guided 40 students, really quite bespoke. We don't take on more than 40, just simply because it is a lot of energy needed to work with these 10-year-olds. So I have a lot of respect for schools that work with many more. So we got 93% of the most selective 11 boarding schools, the all boys, all girls, and a few co-ed schools. So let's see what we would advise students and parents to do. Whether or not you engage a consultant doesn't matter, but you should think about these 6 steps. The first is we always meet parents and children together to really understand their education aspiration and path planning. So if the students, you know, in the right curriculum currently in Hong Kong, maybe actually staying in Hong Kong is better for them. What's the student's longer term aspiration? Do they have any profession in mind? Or any subject in particular in mind, because that may even impact whether they should leave earlier or later for boarding school. Is US an option? You know, even the mindset of the parent will determine what kind of school they may want to focus on. Again, as mentioned earlier, the timeline is very, very confusing. So what schools they're aiming for and when they need to prepare for what kind of exam or interviews. We really promote students to not just engage in one-on-one tutoring, which is honestly quite a, it could be quite a mundane process for a 9 to 11-year-old, and it could be quite passive. It's very effective, but relatively passive. So we do a lot of group class teaching to inspire students to think in teams, and also to engage in a discussion-based learning, because that is basically a prequel preparation for interviews, and also to help them immerse into the teaching and learning environment in the UK. So Socrates is actually our flagship program on thinking. So we ask lots of open-ended questions, and I encourage parents to also do that with your child. Questions like, you know, why are planes usually white? Usually, right? But don't give me 2 reasons, give me 5. And it gets really hard, and it gets students really thinking why people take planes, etc. So we have a lot of such specialist tutors in Hong Kong and UK, many with Oxbridge backgrounds, offering on-site and online tutoring across all subjects and across all ages. So that allows us to tailor students' preparations for different schools. We also have our own mock papers, because some of our students are very diligent, and they do all the papers available to be bought in bookstores. So we actually have our own papers to further assess their abilities. By invitation, and depending on whether the student needs it, we also do these kind of like passion projects to really highlight a student's passion in a particular area. So for example, the last one here, superhero and maths, is actually done by a 12-year-old. He came, his mom said, you know, he's really talented in maths, but he actually didn't want to do more maths because he found it irrelevant at school. So we ended up doing a project with him to disprove the reality of superhero through using maths. Hopefully then to help them get into the top schools possible. The one in the middle is actually really interesting. He got basically kicked out of schools in Hong Kong, joined Socrates, and we realized he's actually quite talented, and he was really interested in the concept of power. So we did a whole thing on Ottoman power, you know, the Greek power, Roman Empire, and he's now actually at Winchester. So so with that, I think I'm up with my 20+ minutes of sharing. So I talked a little bit about ARCH, what we do, and our insights, why, you know, top UK boarding schools are attractive, and how they're different by assessments, and is really, you know, reflective of, if you're going for the more selective schools where assessments are needed, what are the latest trends, and lastly, the 6-step preparation for parents to consider if you are applying for these schools in the UK. So if interested, contact us and we can meet you for an hour, and your children as well, to assess the best possible preparation path. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen, and thank you for all these insights. Now we'll begin the Q&A session, and I'll begin with the first question. So the first question is, which schools ask for the UK ISET or ISEB? And is there any consistency, or is it usually random?
Yeah, well, I can't list out all the schools right now. So I think that the first qualifying response, because I don't want to be inaccurate and miss out any schools, is do check with each school. But some schools actually make UKSET compulsory, and some schools it's just for reference. I think the very, very top schools are increasingly using pre-ISEP. It is still is also a computerized test. It's because they find the nonverbal and verbal reasoning and reflective of students' abilities. So for the pre-ISEP examinations, most, if not all, the all-boys schools, for example, use it. And for example, Wellington also uses it. A few of the top all-girls schools like Benenden also uses the pre-ISEP now. So the most accurate response to this question is to check with each school, because I can't list out all the schools here.
Thank you, Jen. And the next question is, does Arch offer help for getting financial aid or scholarships? And overall, are these difficult to attain for Hong Kong students since we are overseas entries?
Yeah, we have been very successful over the years helping students apply for university scholarships, because these are all, public scholarships. For boarding school scholarships, it really depends on the child because it's very school specific. And some schools like Cheltenham College, for example, offer 6 or 7 different types of scholarships. They even have like digital scholarship. Winchester is doing like sports scholarship when most people think Winchester is very academic. So there are different scholarships offered at school. We actually helped Radley establish their scholarship just for Hong Kong students, and it's a 6-year scholarship, fully funded, a very generous one. So different scholarships have different offering as well. Some is just a token financial scholarship, some is really needs-based. So this year we had a lot of students being offered scholarship, so they do the regular assessments, did really well, and got invited to sit the scholarship paper. And you may fail the scholarship paper, but you still might get in as a regular student, or you may do well in the scholarship paper. But those scholarship tend to be more like token, merit-based, as opposed to need-based, which would be a larger amount.
Thank you, Jen. And the next question is, many of these schools are testing for English and mathematics for entrance, but some of these other schools, for example, Undulwich School, requires Year 7 candidates to take science exams. First, since there's no syllabus for science in Hong Kong primary schools, how can they get prepared for these, these exams? And then in addition to that, how does Arch help these students prepare?
Yeah. So one way would be referencing Key Stage, which is exactly what Wycombe Abbey is offering, because it's actually quite a set syllabus on science, even for primary school. And but one thing is that the UK examination question format, or the way they ask questions, is a little bit different because they're more experimental. So whereas Hong Kong is more technical, whereas in the UK they sometimes actually expect students to have done some experiments. So that part actually will need students to do a bit more practicum, so which we can't help. But if they're in a school setting like yourself, then they can actually engage in these experiments along the way as well.
Thank you, Jen. And to follow up on that question, how early should parents be preparing for their child if they're interested in boarding school entry? And in addition to that, when they're applying, should they usually be applying a year prior to entry or 2 years?
Yeah. So as mentioned earlier, the timeline really differs by school. So some schools do 1 year prior, some do 3 years prior. Some you can just go directly right now and enter, and they are less selective. But for sixth form entry, 16 plus is usually 1 year prior. But for 13 plus, 12 plus, 11 plus, it depends on the school. In terms of the actual assessments, again, it also differs by school. We would recommend that students, first of all, have a think about whether they want to go for all boys or all girls, because these schools tend to be more selective, and therefore the registration date also tends to be earlier. And also second question that would be thinking when you want to go at 11, 13 or 16, or even in between those ages as well, because that will then impact on what kind of assessments you need to do and when you need to start preparing. I sometimes actually feel it takes a bit more longer time for students to prepare for the 11 plus and 13 plus, simply because they're younger. If they're at 16 plus applying for the last 2 years of boarding school, they tend to assess them on subject knowledge, which could coincide with their local curriculum, right? But if they're younger, the gap tends to be a bit bigger, and also they're younger, it's harder to prepare them and ensure that they perform on the day. So it takes a bit more time to immerse them into the learning style.
Thank you, Jen. I believe we only have time for about one more question. So the last question is, what do you think is the most challenging part for boarding school entry that Hong Kongers should be aware of?
I think the academic side of things can be prepared, and depending on how much time you have, you can, basically put more energy into it, right? I think one thing that I think is very qualitative, and whether a student gets it or not, we ask schools for feedback. They often say, oh, we want to see if they're the right fit, if they have that spark, if we see them enjoying the school, right? So it's very qualitative. It kind of is very soft, but at the same time, it's so true. So I would really encourage parents to actually visit the school, because if you visit the school, as I heard from a earlier speaker, you can smell the school, and then you will know which school is really right for the child. And so in the interview, they can also portray in a more natural way to the interviewer. So I think it's really an interview, because at the end of the day, getting through the assessments, you could technically prepare for these assessments, but when it comes to whether you're the right fit or whether you have the spark right for that school, it's really about cultural fit.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you for your time today and for joining us and sharing all your insights. Now, before I let you go, do you have any last words for our guests?
I would say, I think a lot of parents love ranking tables, and I know ranking tables are a great reference point, but do actually ensure that you understand that secondary school is really a stepping stone into university. So it's really about personal development as well. So find a school that you feel the child can enjoy and excel in. Is at times more important than just going by the ranking tables.
For your detailed information regarding boarding school preparation and the application process.
Yes, and you have a great school coming up, Radley, right?
Yes.
Hi. Okay, I love this school. I love Radley, just want to say. My son is applying in 9 years, okay, Harry?
Excellent.
Thank you, bye.
Bye, Jen.
I would now like to introduce Harry Hammond of Radley School. Harry Hammond started teaching at Worksop College, then moved to Bedford School where he became a day housemaster, then on to Radley for the last 26 years. At Radley, Harry was head of chemistry and then a boarding housemaster for 12 years. Since 2010, he has been on the senior management team as head of the extracurricular program and now as head of external affairs, including international recruitment. In the last 5 years, Radley's proportion of international boarding students has grown from 2% to 13%, with about half that number coming from Hong Kong or mainland China. Welcome, Harry.
Thanks, Helen. Thanks very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, excellent. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Jen Ma, for that kind endorsement of Radley. We've thoroughly enjoyed working with Arch, I have to say. And as she said, they've been looking after a thing we've got called the Greater China Scholarship. We've currently got a boy at the school who's fully funded from Hong Kong, which is a lovely thing to do. So, as Helen said, part of my role now is in looking after international recruitment. And we currently have, I think it's about 35 boys from Hong Kong at the school. In fact, quite a few of them are staying here now over the Expat weekend and having a great time. I watched them play table tennis last night, and it's pretty impressive. So we love having boys here from overseas, and particularly from Hong Kong or mainland China. They just offer a kind of freshness to the school. whether they come in year 9 or year 10 or in the 6th form. They obviously bring academic independence and clout, but equally they are increasingly contributing in many areas of school life. Recently we had an 8-man debating team, and 5 of those boys were from Hong Kong, which was an extraordinary achievement. Some of them, well, a lot of them, it wasn't their first language, of course. In return, I think what you will see by your son coming to a school like this is you will see their confidence grow, their ability to get on with a wide range of people. And I absolutely see that. I see a small boy arriving, age 13, and who can hardly say a word. And by the end, he's looking people in the eye, he's shaking hand, or when he's allowed to. He's so much more socially confident. And that confidence comes from a boarding community, obviously. It comes from the classes, but it really comes a lot from the extracurricular program. And that's really what I'm going to talk about here today. Their involvement with other boys in different sort of situations, whether it's a completely new activity they're doing or something they're really good at, but they're mixing and they're evolving with other boys. So I'm going to talk about the range of activities we have here and reasons why we think they're important. But if you will just bear with me, I'm going to just indulge a little bit of information about Radley. And the first slide is wrong because we're not 690 boys anymore. Sorry, I only spotted that just seconds ago. We're now at 740. We've opened a new boarding house, so we've got 11 boarding houses. Any school will put 3 things as its pillars. It will have pastoral care, it will have academic success, and it will have extracurricular. Now, to be honest, as a parent, the thing you will want to have right is the pastoral care. That's got to be at the center of everything. The well-being of your child has to be the most important thing, and you should get that at any good boarding school in England. But the other 2 are right up there in terms of your child's development. So that's a picture of some boys. We are very, very close to Oxford. We're about 3 miles from Oxford. And that's why they wear those gowns. The Oxford students wear the gowns for their final exams. Many of the traditions at Radley are based on Oxford. So we call the boarding houses, we call them socials, which is from the Latin socialis, meaning junior common room. We have very close links with the university through academia, through debating and things like that, going to lectures, but also through some sports as well. So we are blessed with an incredibly beautiful site. It's around about 700 acres. Therefore, if at Radley every boy has approximately an acre to himself, I'm told that if Hong Kong was flattened and everyone had an equal share, everyone would have a square meter to themselves. So, and they come here and they love the space. And again, we're not unique. So forgive me sounding a bit of an advert for Radley, but we're not unique. You'll find us at so many schools. They'll get out the car on day when we had a boy arrive. In fact, it was for the quarantine period. He got out the car, he just opened his arms out and said, "This is so exciting, just the space, the greenery to get around." If you look in the distance, you'll see Oxford. And if you look in the foreground, you'll see a boarding house where we were based, and also the extraordinary games pitches. And the facilities at British schools are second to none. It's quite extraordinary. There has been a bit of an arms race in terms of facilities over the last 20 years. So you'll see wonderful sports halls, you'll see sort of climbing walls, you'll see great swimming pools. Thing we are blessed with is all that, but equally our pitches, I think, I say modestly, are probably the best in the country. They are fantastic. I just left that one in because it's such a pretty picture. You can see the college pond there, and that is the 8th golf hole for keen golfers, plays over the pond. And the boys sometimes do a little sort of scuba dive and collect sackfuls of balls out of there. Quite a few schools have golf courses, I would say. I can do top of my head about 5 or 6 that I know about. There's probably more than that. So just a quick word on the academic before we move on to the co-curricular. We're around about 90% A star to B. We've been up to 93% last year and a couple of years ago as well. It depends on the cohort. You keep pushing. It's all about aspiration though. It's all about the boys at the lower to middle end we bring on to get those B grades or even get those A grades. And it's all about great teaching and about great relationships in the classroom. And finally, on the academic, a lot of boys coming from Hong Kong are extremely good at mathematics, and it is an extraordinary department. So it says there, 2 Dons teach undergraduates at Oxford along with their school teaching. And a lot of boys go from the top further maths set to Oxford or Cambridge. But we're here really to talk, and that's the end of the advert really, well, sort of. We're here to talk about co-curricular, whoops, go back one. And music, let's start with music, which is such a key part of a lot of boys' lives. And it's difficult to underestimate the importance of music. What a great skill it is. It just shows a boy's willingness to put in the hours. It shows a boy's willingness to be part of a team. And it also says an awful lot about the way he can perform under pressure. It is extraordinary training to perform under pressure. I see these boys doing solo concerts and I'm just blown away. They've got a big audience in front of them. They've got to control their fine motor skills, control their nerve, control their heartbeat, and perform. And they do perform really well. So music is such a great skill to learn at a young age. I didn't. I was more of a sportsman, but I started playing the double bass when I was 40. I had to play in one concert. There were just 3 of us, 2 violinists and me. And I've never been so terrified in my life. I was absolutely awful. But the boys do very well. So you will know that. You will understand that, I'm sure, quite apart from the beauty of the sound and everything else. It's such a great skill for life. So that is one of the sections in the orchestra, the flute section. And you'll see 3 boys there, and you'll see 4 boys, I think, one's half hidden, who are from Hong Kong in the flute section. Part of the beauty of being an all-boys school is that, of course, girls tend to be very, very good at these sort of things at quite a young age. So it's quite nice that a boy can arrive with us, and he might only be sort of, I don't know, grade 4 or something like that, good though that is, but he wouldn't get into an orchestra, possibly an all-girls school or a co-ed school even. But he gets in the orchestra and my goodness, he gets better. So again, it's about aspirations, about having opportunities to improve. We have a whole range of different groups around the place. We have jazz groups, we have things called coffee concerts every week. We have swing band, big band, etc., etc. So, and again, most schools will provide that. The choir is terribly important to us. We have a choir of over 100, increasingly well represented by boys from Hong Kong. Choir, one of the things that's nice about these kind of schools is that you don't have to be a first 15 rugby player or even a top academic or whatever it is to earn the respect of others. And being part of something like a choir does earn you a huge amount of kudos. The other boys respect the beautiful sound that comes from the choir. They also lead the singing in chapel, which is really important to us and to other schools as well. So moving on from music to drama, this is Sweeney Todd, in case you're worried, it looks like a sort of assassination attempt. There are huge numbers of opportunities to take part in drama, and we do a musical every other year. And if I'm honest, it's probably the one area where boys from Hong Kong or China are not massively well represented. I'm just not sure that they feel they can do it often, which I think is a real shame. I'd like to see it more because, as I said, there are opportunities. And a bit like music, why is drama important? Well, it's the teamwork, it's the discipline, but it also, I think, brings out a whole side to a boy's character that you might not know is there. I can think of one boy who came to my boarding house from a state school, in fact, and this was quite a big change. He was on a big bursary, and he was very, very shy, never said a word really most of his first year. and then gradually you saw his confidence develop. And in his last year, he won a thing called declamations, which some schools do, where you have to learn a piece and declaim it in front of your year group. And he also had a leading part in the school play. And I remember seeing him walk on and do his part brilliantly. And it was, so it was, the drama, I think, can bring out a special side to the boys. It is also, from their point of view, a good way to meet girls, and they rather like that as well. This was a junior play we did recently. When the boys arrive here, they are part of a drama competition, and I think a lot of schools do the same kind of thing. They put on a piece after, they've only been at the school about 3 or 4 weeks, and they put on a little piece of drama. And again, like the other things we've been talking about, it's not necessarily the sportsman, it's perhaps the quieter boy who shows something a little bit different on the stage, and he gets to know the other boys in his year group well. They earn respect, and they have a lot of fun as well. So that was a whole school production of a musical, which is very colourful and enjoyable. Art, let's move on to art. Art, I think, is particularly useful because this time, perhaps we're not talking about teamwork, we're talking about individual skills. One of the questions we're often asked on the admissions side is, what sort of boy is suited to Radley? And I would say, what sort of boy is suited to any boarding school, really? I always say 2 things. One is, I think that it's something that he wants to do. He wants to really invest in 5 years at the school, and both his parents want to do the same thing. That might sound an obvious statement, but it isn't always true. There can be a push from more one side than the other. The other thing I think is he has to like to be busy. And art's one of those things on a Sunday afternoon or something like that. He'd go to the art studios and spend time working on a project. There'll be someone there just to supervise him. And I think that's really important. And again, it's sometimes as a boy or girl, you can get pigeonholed. You can be someone that's only good at sport, only good at academics. When they come to school like this, they can have the opportunity to try something new, try something that they didn't know they were good at. And I wish I'd learned art when I was at school, I have to say. So we put art everywhere around the school, and you'll see it at a lot of schools. And it really brightens the place up in all departments. And I teach chemistry, and we've got a huge amount of artwork up on our walls. It's lovely to see. And there'll be all sorts of different ways of doing the art. Obviously, you have the pottery, the model building, apart from the usual painting. So on to sport, and a huge number of sports are played at British schools. We do rowing, rugby, hockey, cricket, football and tennis as our sort of major participation sports, but there's a huge range of other sports. We mentioned golf earlier, any number of racket sports. We had a boy come recently from Hong Kong in the bottom rugby team in his year group in his first year, and he finished the term in the top team. And we're seeing that more and more, that it can be rugby or rowing or sports perhaps you didn't expect, again, something they didn't expect to be good at, they find they are. And health and fitness generally is something that is quite rightly quite a buzz around in Britain. A lot of young people, when they leave school, they go to gyms and things like that. So getting them used to looking after their body and therefore keeping their mental fitness as well is really important. We've got a high-tech rowing tank. We do actually have a boy from mainland China who's pushing for a place in the first 8 this year, which is really nice. Football, a lot of the boys like football, which is great. It's not by no means vital they like football, but it kind of is a good thing, because a lot often in a boarding house, a boy will say, let's go and have a kick around, and it's nice if the boy likes to do that. It's not a major sport for us, but we do have about 180 boys representing the school on match days on most Saturdays in the Lent term. Tennis is increasingly popular, and boys are well represented from all parts of the world on that one. But it's not just tennis, we have real tennis, we have squash, badminton, fives, you name a kind of ball sport, we do it, as do a lot of schools. Now here's a sport where you don't see many boys from Hong Kong. It's a sport that Radley's pretty good at, and We've had a couple of captains of the England cricket side go to the school. I would like to see at some stage, and I'm going to keep tabs on this, to see a boy from Hong Kong or mainland China in the first 11. It might take a few years. I have to say they're not pushing at the moment. There's just a couple more sports pictures, just moving along swiftly. Badminton, it's a traditional sport for Hong Kong boys, and they're very good at it, and they have the opportunity to do it, which is lovely. And it's great. Yeah, they need some things that are familiar to them, the badminton or the table tennis, in addition to trying something new. Now, Outward Bounds is something that could be something completely new to boys. We have a CCF section, as do a lot of schools. We do the Duke of Edinburgh Award, which again is pretty much most schools do the Duke of Edinburgh Award. And these expeditions are memorable. I have to say, I can still remember mine vividly 45 years ago. I remember the rain. Actually, I do remember bright sunshine as well. I remember the insects. I remember the food that wasn't very good. But I do remember, just in the end, you look back and you think, even though you have blisters on your feet and things, you've had a fantastic time. There is nothing more bonding than with a group of boys. You've overcome adversity. You've walked a long way. You've learned some important skills as well in terms of looking after yourself with how to read a compass and a map, how to put up a tent and all those sort of skills. But it's more important is that you just have this fantastic bonding exercise with your team. So Outward Bound is a great thing. So co-curricular isn't just all about sort of activities and movement. It's also about smaller, sort of quieter clubs. This is the film unit. But you'd expect, we have which is, if you look at our videos on our website, they're all made by boys, overseen by member staff, of course, but they do learn great skills. We have quite a few people go on into the film industry from the school, actually. But you've got a whole range of societies. We've got things such as philosophy, journalism, water polo, clay pigeon shooting, contract bridge, horse racing, wine tasting, you name it. We do it, as do an awful lot of schools. It is just part of the richness of the place. So just coming to the end of the 20 minutes now, I'll just finish with that picture because it's such a great picture from our coffee shop. So let me just summarize 4 quick points to finish off. So co-curricular, it's the reason a lot of families want to send their child over to Britain. It's what the boys want, and it is what we do. The skills learned from the co-curricular program will be make your son a more rounded and, dare I say, more interesting person. It will undoubtedly be something that a future employer will be interested in. A friend of mine works on the recruitment side for Vodafone, and yeah, he'd expect them all to have A grades. He'd expect them all to have 2-1 or better degree. What he wants to see is what kind of person are they? What are they interested in? What do they do that they don't have to do? Do they make the effort to go and play the music, to be in the sports team, to do the society? How interesting are they? Do they make him laugh? And often those sort of skills are learned through these activities. At school, boys don't have to be the best at everything. It's about aspiration, and they can be very poor at something, but they come to somewhere like this and they learn to get good at it. And finally, like you speak to anyone, I bet you turn around now and speak to someone, what's your life like? They'll say busy. Life is busy. Life is used to doing lots of things, and balancing academic, sport and co-curricular is great training for life. Okay, thank you very much. That's the end of my talk, and we can have some questions, but the contact details are below. Thanks.
Thank you, Harry, and thank you for your presentation. Certainly a beautiful campus. So we'll begin the Q&A session now. So the first question is, what are the years of entry available at Radley, and how many places are offered for those overseas entry?
Okay, sorry, can you say the start of the question again, Wallace?
Yes, so what are the years of entry that's available at Radley?
Okay, so years of entry, I mean, the main point of entry is year 9, which is when we have an intake of 140, 150 boys. We do take some boys in year 10, but I would, if you're thinking of coming over, I should definitely look to go in year 9. Year 10, it depends, it varies, maybe about 8 boys, something like that. And then the other point of entry is the start of the 6th form. So it's year 12. where now that we've got another boarding house, instead of taking our usual kind of 8 or 10, we're now taking 20, 25. So that is an important point of entry. And we welcome applicants there. We welcome points at those 3 points, but mainly year 9 and mainly year 12. And in terms of assessment, as parents probably know, a lot of boys are now being assessed when they're in year 6, is when we do the ISEB common pretest. And that's when decisions are made for when they're in year 9. But you can apply any time through year 6, 7 or 8, because obviously there's a scholarship in year 8 as well.
Thank you, Harry. And furthermore to that question, how many places do you offer each year?
How many places?
Yes, are offered, correct.
In total. So, well, for year 9 entry, as I said, it's 140, 150 boys come in. Year 10, 8 to 10 boys, 6th form, 20, 25.
Great, thank you. And then to add on to that question, how does the application process look for an applicant, especially from someone that's interested in applying from Hong Kong?
Okay. The application process said should start ideally, parents are thinking about it in year 6 is a good time to think about it. They contact the school. In the old days, pre-COVID, they'd come and visit. As I think Jennifer said quite rightly, that is by far the best thing to do, is to come over and visit schools. Now, we can't do that at the moment, so there's lots of virtual tours and things going on. If possible, it's got to be a good thing, I would think, to come over to the country for possibly years 7 and 8 as well. And secondary schools will help coordinate that with the prep school to direct them to various prep schools where they can go. I know it's not for everyone, but I think it's good to do 2 years so they kind of learn the ropes when they're young, they make friends, and then they move on to the school with those friends. For 6th form, the application is in November prior to entry, so it's quite a later entry. All schools will assess in November prior to the following September.
Thank you, Harry. And for those that are applying, how should they prepare? Like, what kind of boys are you looking for?
Okay, that's a great question. And the answer is, and any school, well, I hope would say this, is that we're not looking for any kind of boy. We're just looking for somebody that really wants to come and someone that we feel will benefit from the school. It's really important that I think often you hear the word fit used. You'll be a good fit. That's not what we're looking for. We're not looking for a type to fit into a certain pigeonhole. We're looking for someone who can come here who will, they've got to cope with it because, they've got to fly thousands of miles and they've got to show independence, which is why I think we really admire these boys coming from Hong Kong, because they show that. They've got to have that ability. They've got to, we think, be able to get along with other boys. Obviously, that is important. So they've got to have, I think, a certain amount of social ability because we don't want someone, and parents don't want it either, for someone who's going to lock themselves in their study and just just work for 5 years. So we've got to feel somebody that will take advantage of what we've got here. So there's absolutely no type. I think what we would all say, I think, is that when they leave at the end of 5 years, they will have certain attributes in common, and those things such as sociability, such as an interest in other people, such as a kindness and generosity, which I think boarding brings out, because you have to be like that to get along. You come here as a bit of a kind of, I don't know, sort of look at me type person, you're not going to get on too well. So boarding's very good at sort of learning those softer skills, but definitely there's no type. In terms of preparation, I would say part of the application process is an interview. So I just think not excessive interview practice. That is the death knell of any application. But I would say getting used to talking to people, just around the dinner table, talking about stuff, being used to having opinions and things like that. That's an important thing for the interview process. The rest of the application is about, realizing the kind of papers they're going to have to sit and doing a certain amount of practice at them, of course. And the other thing is to get a nice report from your school. So do lots of good things at their school so they get a nice report.
Thank you, Harry. And the next question is more related to your presentation. Now, regarding extracurriculars and co-curriculars, the first question is some of these trips that you've shown, such as Outward Bound and the travels, is that included or is that an extra charge? And then the second question for co-curriculars is, how does Radley balance the student's life with co-curriculars and academics, and is there any guidance program or help given by the school?
Okay, in terms of the charges, for trips like that for the CCF, I think there would be maybe a small charge. I don't think very much. I mean, those trips are not massively expensive to run because the boys are camping, so it's just a transfer getting up and back. But I mean, very little for that sort of thing. The charges would come more for the trips. Say, perhaps you're flying with the History of Art group, you're going to Florence. Obviously, there's going to be a charge for that sort of trip. For sports trips and things like that, yes, there would be a charge. But for things such as CCF, I think, if anything, it's very small. I don't think it's a big deal. So I wouldn't concern yourself about that. We want the boys to get out and about. Often it's a case of just driving their minibus and dumping them somewhere and letting them camp and things. So no, very small is the answer for that stuff. The other question you asked, it's already gone out of my head. What was it you asked about?
How does the school help balance between academics? Yes.
Yeah. Sure. Okay, so when the boy arrives, he would have a housemaster who is his key person for 5 years. There's no doubt about it. The housemaster will know your son really well. He'll know you. He'll know your other children. He'll know your dog's name or whatever. So the housemaster gets to know the child really well. Now, every housemaster would encourage the boy to do lots of things. He will also have an overview of the academics, and the reports come in regularly. Every school will be doing internal reports probably every quarter of term. So you get lots of internal reports. You get lots of feedback from teachers. If it's not working out, if a boy's overstretched, then we need to come in and check that the schedule works. And it could be that you say, look, you've got too much on, you need to give that up. Normally, it's amazing what boys can achieve. What I've just said, sometimes is a problem. Often, I think boys take on more and they continue to thrive. It's the old thing about give a job to a busy man. So the boy that's in the rowing 8 and it means he gets into that rowing 8 and his work improves. Even though he's putting in more time to the sport, the kind of discipline and the physical well-being has improved his work. So I'm not a great believer that, oh, he's too busy, it's affecting his work. Nah, normally they're busy, they work more efficiently. Every day you've got 24 hours, you can divide it in between 8 hours of organized activities like lessons or lunch or chapel or games. You've got 8 hours of sleep, hopefully. That leaves 8 hours in a day to do stuff. And it's all about efficiency of time, not about the activities, I think.
Harry, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for your expertise. Now, before I let you go, do you have any parting words for our guests?
No, I mean, only to say, as I'm sure a lot of people are saying, we just look forward to seeing you again. We love having visitors here. We love visiting Hong Kong and meeting you there. So let's hope this clears soon and we can see each other in person.
Yes, thank you so much, Harry. We hope so too. Thanks for your enlightening presentation about Radley. Our next presentation will be from William Rees, the former Director of Admissions at Eton College. After 14 years as a housemaster at Eton College, William Rees became Director of Admissions in 2001 and steered the introduction of a new, transparent and meritocratic entry system for the school. Since returning from Eton in 2009, he has worked as an independent admissions consultant for schools and families. As an associate consultant for BE, he has toured Chinese cities each year, giving talks and advice on UK boarding education. Welcome, William Rees.
Thank you very much, Donna Marie. Can you hear me? Excellent, good. Well, good afternoon to you all in Hong Kong, and I'm delighted to be with you, if only electronically, in these difficult times. I'm very glad to know that many families in Hong Kong and other parts of Asia remain interested in boarding education in the UK. I'm talking to you from my home and without PowerPoint because I'm giving you an overview from my experience and not representing any particular school. There's a great range of independent boarding schools. They're called independent because they are individual institutions free of state control, though they are subject to inspection to ensure educational quality and student welfare. Most do not have shareholders. Any surplus is reinvested in facilities and staff and in financial assistance for students who need it. Within that great range of schools, the essence of parental choice and student recruitment is this: getting the right child in the right school for the right reasons. Schools at the top academic end are highly selective and very oversubscribed, and they require a high level of competence in English at assessment and on arrival, with few, if any, concessions made on that. Other schools who have a less competitive entry field offer linguistic support to students who are less fluent in English on arrival. A few schools have special international sections for the progressive integration of students who arrive with weak English. Now, there's a tendency in Asia to over-focus on a few world-famous schools, which are seen as top global brands: Eton, Winchester, Harrow, Wycombe Abbey, Cheltenham Ladies College. This exclusive ambition is not wise. If you have an academically powerful child with other talents and interests, because even the top academic schools will be assessing those other creative and sporting talents and interests, not just IQ scores and examination marks. If you have an academically strong child, by all means aim for the top with one or two of your choices, but then have 3 or 4 other schools on a scale of academic performance as an insurance policy, a sensibly graded backup range. If you had decided that the UK model of boarding education is what you want, that is the key thing. And then it is a matter of finding the right level and style of school for your child. There are many brilliant schools which are not world famous, but which add huge value to the development of children who are of reasonable to good ability, rather than being obvious high flyers from the start. And they do it without pressurizing those children beyond their natural capacities, but by stimulating them in every way. And those students will move on to good universities, even if not perhaps necessarily Oxford, Cambridge, or Harvard. It's important to grasp that academic performance and potential form only part of the assessments carried out at UK schools. Their ethos is to give every student the opportunity to fulfill himself or herself in every way, through a broad liberal curriculum, through sport, through music, drama and art and many other activities, and to build character through broad development of life skills, confidence, resilience, adaptability, critical thinking, emotional intelligence and good listening, friendly competitiveness, teamwork, loyalty and social awareness, creativity, initiative, leadership and responsibility within a community with a shared sense of purpose. Beyond academic marks, UK schools are looking for the potential in the student to respond to that great range of developmental opportunity, to put a lot in and therefore get a lot out. What we know from experience in the UK is that the best academic results are achieved by students who are fulfilled as all-round human beings, who have been creatively challenged by the liberal curriculum and at the same time supported by a strong pastoral system focused on the individual. Students achieve their potential when they are happy and comfortable in a school environment, and not when they are over-pressurized by unrealistic parental aspirations and expectations. Now, this may be an uncomfortable message for you to hear, but it is an important part of your understanding as you approach UK boarding. When children are not comfortable in their academic environment, it causes unhappiness, underachievement, and sometimes serious emotional and psychological problems. Asian students who are over-tutored and focused only on high marks tend not to present themselves as having the potential to respond to the opportunities I have outlined. And rejection at assessment can be puzzling to their parents. In my time running admissions, Eton College typically rejected at least 30% of the top 100 scorers on the pure tests, and I believe it's still the same. Top UK schools are looking for students who are open to new experience, imaginative, creative and critical in their thinking, intellectually curious and excited about ideas and knowledge. Students who convey a versatile commitment and generosity of spirit, who will integrate socially and not just stick to their own ethnic group, and not just sit in their room playing computer games. Parents seeking the UK model of boarding education have a vital role in encouraging and developing this expansive spirit in children well before they apply to UK schools. Without overstructuring things, children need freedom to play imaginatively and to explore non-academic activities for their own sake, rather than just for certificates. I have a vivid memory of the first evening of my first visit to Hong Kong 6 years ago. I met a mother whose very intelligent daughter was soon to be a candidate for entry to one of the very top UK girls' schools at age 16. The girl was also a very talented violinist, but the mother had stopped her violin lessons and practice so that she could have extra maths tutoring. That is absolutely the wrong approach and is not what UK schools want, even at the highest academic level. I advised her to reverse that strategy immediately. She did, and the girl got a place at that leading school. In my experience, in bridging educational cultures, there does tend to be a particular misunderstanding about maths. Many Asian children excel at mathematical problem solving, of course, and we welcome and admire that. But if it means that they have no passion and no analytical interest in subjects like history and literature and languages, because those subjects are not precise in their outcomes, those students are not attractive to UK school assessors who are looking for open rather than closed minds. All of this is why the interview is so important as part of assessment. For many schools, the interview is as important as the tests, and the two are considered together along with a report from the present school. The interview can be a culture shock for Asian students. It may well be the student's first experience of the teacher-student relationship in the UK, which is based on interaction and discussion, on mutual critical exploration of knowledge and ideas, rather than education as a package delivered by the teacher to be absorbed by the student and regurgitated in examinations. Every interview is unique, with its own flow and no ticking of boxes. Answers are not right or wrong. The interest is in the quality and coherence of thought and expression, in the student's personality, enthusiasms, imagination, and curiosity. The interviewer is quietly thinking, would I like to have this student in my class? Would I like to have this student in my boarding house? The student will be invited to disagree and argue, and asked to defend his or her ideas and opinions. This can all be very disconcerting for students who are not prepared for it. And either they lapse into fearful silence, or they talk too much because they are nervous. I always tell students when I'm preparing them for the interview experience that the more it feels like a dynamic and interesting 50-50 conversation, the better it's going. The more it feels like an uncomfortable one-way interrogation, the worse it's going. And when I say preparing for interview, I don't mean coaching in what to say. Pre-learned responses are obvious to school interviewers and are counterproductive. Schools want to meet the real personality of the student. Some schools, including Eton now, also require candidates to take part in group activities, which will give an impression of their leadership qualities, their attitude to teamwork, their capacity for listening and empathy, and a sense of how well they will fit into a boarding community, or perhaps not. The higher up the academic scale you're aiming, the earlier you need to start planning, researching, and taking knowledgeable advice. Every independent school has its own timing and its own process, though there is some sharing of tests. But broadly, for top girls' schools, you need to register by age 9, for assessment at 10, and entry into year 7 at age 11, though there are also some places at age 13. For top boys' schools, must be registered by 10, for assessment at 11, and entry at age 13. It is important to note, by the way, that most of the schools at the top of the academic rankings are single-sex. Formal applications are largely enforced at the heavily oversubscribed top schools, and their entry cohorts are fixed after assessment. But many co-educational schools offer a more flexible pattern for overseas students. And it is sometimes possible to find a late place in year 10 when the student is already 14 years old. Entry into year 11 is very hard to find and educationally unwise because UK students are halfway through their GCSE courses at that point, and a new arrival will have missed a year of foundation work. There is also entry into year 12 at age 16 for the 2 years to A-level, which can be the right option for certain students. At the top end of that market, vacancies are few, competition is fierce, but many other schools do have a more hospitable planned entry at 16. Candidates for entry at age 16 should expect 4 or 5 subject-based and general interviews at each school they try. An application needs to be made, in most cases, a year before entry. Though at a few top schools, for example, Wycombe Abbey, the process now begins 18 months before entry. Well, I've tried in this short talk to give you some key principles and insights distilled from my 20 years of experience in school admissions and 14 years before that as a housemaster. I hope it's been useful, and we'll be happy now to take any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, William, and thank you for your insights and expertise. So we'll begin the Q&A session now, and I'll begin with the first question. As just a reminder to all our guests, if you do have any questions, please feel free to type them in the Q&A, and we'll try our best to address them. First question is, so pastoral support and individual attention to students, how do these things work?
Well, every student will have a housemaster or housemistress in overall charge of them in the boarding house. And those housemasters and housemistresses usually have deputies as well. And there will be a lady who will play a kind of matron role, who will look after the welfare of the boys or girls. The domestic staff in the house are also important. Sometimes when I was a housemaster, the first indication to me that something was not quite right with a boy would come from a member of the domestic staff. who would notice some change in the pattern of behavior, or that a boy was just not quite feeling right. And that would be the beginning of a pastoral process. Beyond the house itself, there is a wide-ranging system of tutors, where tutors will be responsible for small groups of students and will be responsible for their general cultural education, but also will provide another voice and another ear to listen to that student and to guide that student. Beyond that, there are, of course, doctors and other medical staff. There are chaplains. Big schools will have a chaplain for all the different religions. And for a student who may run into serious emotional or psychological problems, schools also have access to counsellors and psychiatrists. So the support system is very strong.
Thank you, William. Next question is, how does one gauge the academic level of a senior school?
Yes, I talked about the importance of having a scale of schools to apply to, aiming high, but also having some backups. Now, the worst source of information about the academic level of school, the so-called league tables published in British newspapers. That is not a reliable source of information, for all kinds of reasons, which it would take a very long time to explain, but trust me, they're not reliable. Taking some knowledgeable advice from people where you are, if you form a kind of long list of schools, you can then do your own research and construct your own league table of schools. And the way I suggest you do it is you look at the school's A-level results, the exam taken at age 18, and you identify the percentage, this should be on the school's website, you identify the percentage of students scoring A star, A or B grades at A level, the grades that will get the student into a good university. Don't look just at 1 year's results, but look at 4 or 5 years to see if there is a trend upwards or downwards. And somewhere like Winchester or Wycombe Abbey Girls' School, you would expect 95% roughly of their students to be scoring A star, A, B at A level. At Eton, it'll be probably 94. At Radley, Tunbridge, Abingdon, it's going to be 93, 92. These figures will change a little bit from year to year, but you'll be able to identify a pattern. But what's also important is that when you're exploring schools, visiting them virtually, you find out what the entry standard required is for that school. Because there are some very brilliant schools which add enormous value to students' academic progress, which have a lower entry standard than places like Eton and Winchester and Wycombe Abbey and so on. So identifying the entry standard is also important. A school such as Eton will require a 65% plus score on the qualifying exam taken at age 13, just before entry. But there are fantastic schools like, for example, King's Canterbury or Canford, which have a 55% threshold for entry at age 13 in the qualifying exam, but are still getting A-level results on my suggested measure around 83, 84, 85% of students getting A star, A, B at A level. So it's important not just to look at the kind of crude A-level results themselves, but also to set them against the entry standard required of that school at the age of 13. I hope that's helpful.
No, that's great. Thank you, William. So the next question is, in your presentation, you mentioned that many of the top boarding schools in the UK are single-sex schools. Now, why is that, and what are the benefits of single-sex education?
Yeah, well, in the UK, we think it's important that people have the choice. Some people believe very strongly in co-education. Others can see and respond to quite a lot of research that shows that boys and girls mature differently and learn differently. Their emotional development takes place at a different pace. And there are also all kinds of traditional cultural factors in play that parents need to weigh up when deciding between single-sex and co-educational. Single-sex schools can tailor what they do and how they educate students to the particular learning and developmental patterns identifiable in boys and in girls. They also remove prejudice about what are boys' subjects and what are girls' subjects. So, for example, girls tend to flourish particularly in single-sex schools in maths and science and design and technology, where they feel unconstrained by the presence of boys and can really fulfill their potential in those ways. It can also be argued that boys thrive much more in subjects like the arts and humanities and languages when they are on their own. From my own experience and that of my colleagues at Eton, I would also say certainly that when you're dealing with sensitive subjects in literature, in philosophy, in social and health education, boys are much more emotionally open and honest in responding to these subjects when they're on their own than when there are girls in the room. And of course, they get lots of opportunity to mix with girls in the holidays and lots of opportunity to mix with girls through activities like drama and music and social evenings, because boys and girls schools will frequently link up for this kind of activity. So boys' schools are not monasteries. They are open to the world in that sense, but they can offer considerable advantages in the upbringing of boys, and in ways which many of us believe bring great developmental benefits to the male sex.
Sure, of course. Thank you, William. And to follow up on that question, what is the, for those that are perhaps relocating to the UK, what about the day schools there? And what is the preference? Is it boarding school versus day school? What are the advantages, benefits for both?
Yeah, well, obviously it partly comes down to the personality of the student. And the student, as you've heard me say, and I'm sure you've heard from the schools you've been listening to this morning, a certain kind of personality and attitude is required to make a success of boarding. It isn't right for everybody. And for some students, family life, 7 days a week, is very important to them, and they would find it very difficult to give that up and go off to a boarding school. But if a family is relocating to London, and we're probably talking principally about London, there are a lot of powerful day schools in London. It's not a market that I recommend. It is ferociously competitive. Competition to get into the top London day schools is massive, and they have to be very ruthless in their application and testing procedures. They go very much more on test results and much less on interview and all-round qualities. It's a very stressful market, and a lot of families and children in the London day school market do get very stressed by the whole process. But, you know, if that is what a family wants and is relocating to London, then there's plenty of good advice available on the best schools. But again, the same principle would apply of aiming high, but having some good backups.
Thank you, William. And I believe we have time for about one more question. Now, what support is given in university applications to the UK or to the US or elsewhere for that matter?
Yeah, well, all good UK schools invest a great deal in advising, supporting and guiding students through the entry, through the application process to UK and US universities. And all good UK schools have good channels of communication with American universities as well as British universities, and they will help students to prepare. There's been quite an increase in the number of students going to the USA for a different kind of experience as students. One warning though, students going from the UK to the USA are often very bored in their first year at US universities. And my advice would always be to sign up for subjects, if you're going to America, that in your first year will be very different and give you new challenges compared with what you've learned in UK schools, because the A-level course in a UK school really kind of overlaps with the first year at American universities. But those channels of contact are very strong. Students get a great deal of support and advice in university admission.
Thank you, William. And thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate your time and sharing all your expertise and insights for entry into boarding schools. Now, before I let you go, do you have any parting words for our attendees today?
Well, just that I hope that my talk has both encouraged you to think about boarding in the UK, but also given you a clear set of signposts towards the things that could be difficult, that could involve culture shocks, and about the kind of things that UK schools are looking for and the kind of spirit and attitude that's needed in students. So I hope you've got a good balance from me in that respect.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, William, for your very insightful, knowledgeable presentation, which helped immensely. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll now hand you over to Howard Tuckett, the Headmaster of Wycombe Abbey School in Hong Kong.
Thank you very much, Donna Marie, and thank you from me to William as well for joining us. William, you've been an outstanding speaker, and you've closed for us a wonderful 3 weeks of insight and expertise right across the range of British boarding schools, and I can't think of anybody better suited. As the former registrar at Eton College, and also for your very broad expertise for children coming from this part of the world, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, I enjoyed it.
And thank you to our other speakers today, Graeme May from Abingdon, Dr. Nick Black from Dulwich College, Jennifer Ma from Arch Education, and Harry Hammond from Radley, who together with William Rees have given us an outstanding afternoon here in Hong Kong, a pretty early morning for some of them there in UK, but an outstanding event. We are always here in Hong Kong, Wycombe Abbey School, Hong Kong. Do contact us if there's anything you missed, anything you'd like anybody you'd like to be put in touch with, any questions we can answer for you, advice we can give you about making contact with any of these schools or any of the many questions that have come up. Do get in touch with us here at Wycombe Abbey. Thank you for all your questions, which really have made this the most entertaining 3 Saturdays worth of events. So thank you to our, I think at last count, heading up towards 1,500 participants in the event over the last 3 weeks. Our very sincere thanks to Ruth Benny and Top Schools in Hong Kong for hosting the entire event on their Zoom platform. Thank you, Ruth. I can see you down on the thumbnail there, so thank you very much for joining us. And we do look forward to seeing you at many other school events where you appear as a guest or a host in and around Hong Kong. Thank you to my team here, to Wallace Wong, who has worked with me throughout the entire project, and our presentation and hosting team today here, Donna Marie Mitchell and Helen Manalia Wood. Thank you to all of my people here. They're actually sitting about 6 feet away from me in other classrooms and offices, but we're all here hosting you today. And do get in touch and do come and see us here at Wycombe Abbey School, Hong Kong. We are a British curriculum prep school, a private school that is here for all Hong Kongers. We are not an international school just for expatriates. We have Hong Kongers and expatriates at the school, and we would like to meet you. So this closes our 3 weeks of introductions and insights from British boarding schools. We look forward to bringing you a very similar event next year. Hopefully we won't have to think on our feet quite so much to tap dance our way around COVID challenges. We all look forward to a calmer world, a calmer year for schools. But whatever the next year brings you, we bring you all our very best in education and your wider lives. And from all of us, thank you very much for being with us, and good evening.